11 o'clock hour BPR live from the library. The Christie Nome Donald Trump orchestrated ICE immigration crackdown continues, with social media swirling with endless images and videos of agents pulling people out of cars, slamming them face down to the ground, tearing apart families, and in the worst case, the killing of Renee Good. If you wanted to see an immigration crackdown when Trump was elected, what's your take now? And could Minnesota yet again be a tipping point in American politics? Call or text.
I'm Marjorie Egan. Then the Culture Show's Jared Bowen is here to tell us about a new PBS series, Breaking the Deadlock, that explores the role of government in life and death decisions. Plus, we'll get his thoughts on the new Bradley Cooper movie, Is This Thing On?, and other arts headlines. It's all ahead, the 11 o'clock hour at BPR on GBH and NEPM, live from the Boston Public Library.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Janine Herbst. President Trump says he's been weighing military options against Iran, where big anti-government protests continue for a third week. The U.S.-based human rights activist news agency says more than 2,500 people have been killed. NPR's Emily Fang reports Israel has been privately warning the U.S. to hold off on any military action.
An Israeli government source who asked to remain unnamed because they're not authorized to speak to media tells NPR Israel is concerned Iran's regime is not so fragile yet that a U.S. military attack could completely topple it. In Iran, mass demonstrations are going into their third week, and President Trump wrote on social media this week that, quote, help is on its way to Iran without specifying what that meant. The same Israeli government source also told NPR Israeli cabinet members met on Tuesday to discuss Israel's potential response if the U.S. attacked Iran. Emily Fang, NPR News, Tel Aviv.
On a trip to Finland and Norway, Britain's foreign secretary says NATO has to strengthen its defenses in the Arctic in order to counter Russian threats. This as President Trump says NATO should support his effort to make Greenland a part of the U.S. NPR's Lauren Frere has more.
As polar ice melts, the Arctic is home to more shipping routes and critical infrastructure, including undersea cables. It's also where Russian submarines and other ghost fleet ships have been operating. Last week, the U.S. military used British military bases in an operation to seize a Russian-flagged tanker with ties to Venezuela. British Foreign Secretary Yvette Cooper says Russia's actions pose the greatest threat, but that, quote, other state actors are trying to grow their influence in the Arctic as well. President Trump has cited this in his claims for U.S. sovereignty over the Arctic's biggest island, Greenland, though Britain says that should be up to Greenlanders. Lauren Frere, NPR News, London.
The National Association of Realtors says sales of existing homes rose by just over 5% in December, closing out a tough year for home buyers. NPR's Scott Newman reports.
The December numbers represent a seasonally adjusted annual rate of 4.35 million homes sold, capping a year that saw a 1.4% year-on-year increase in existing home sales. Sales increased in all regions of the country from November, but for the year, only the South saw increases, while the Midwest and West were flat, and there was a decrease in existing home sales in the Northeast. The NAR says inventory remains tight, with fewer sellers eager to move. More inventory is expected to come on the market beginning in February, once the weather starts to warm. The median existing home sales price was $405,400, up about $1,700 from the same time last year. Scott Newman, NPR News.
Wall Street's trading lower at this hour. The Dow is down 279 points, NASDAQ down 335. This is NPR News.
Good morning. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro. Massachusetts Congressman Seth Moulton pushing a bill to cut funding for ICE and repurpose the money for health care tax credits that expired at the end of last year. Move comes as multiple Republicans in the U.S. House and Senate have signaled a willingness to bring back the subsidies in defiance of GOP leadership and as outrage grows over ICE's tactics. In filing the bill, Moulton has joined the chorus of Democrats who say ICE funding is a shutdown-worthy issue.
What happened in Minnesota was an outright murder for anyone who can look at it with their own two eyes. And we should not be funding the continuation of ICE terrorizing American cities.
Moulton says his bill would bring funding for ICE back down to $10 billion a year compared to the nearly $30 billion at the agency's disposal right now. And a new report promoted by the conservative New England think tank Fiscal Alliance Foundation and Americans for Prosperity warns that the region's decarbonization or clean energy plans could add as much as $815 billion in electricity costs by 2050. State House News Service reports the analysis produced by Always On Energy Research contends that current clean energy mandates focus heavily on solar, onshore, and offshore wind, as well as battery storage, would be far more expensive than alternatives centered on nuclear and natural gas. Cloudy low 50s today. We're at 49 degrees in Boston right now. It is 50 degrees in Springfield. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include the Pew Charitable Trusts, sharing about the state of housing in America on the After the Fact podcast, available at pewtrusts.org/afterthefact, and the Doris Duke Foundation.
He is Jim Brady. I am Marjorie Yeagan. You're listening to BPR and GBH and NEPM. We are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library. Thank you. And streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. At noon today, Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley will Zoom in. At 1 o'clock, we're joined by Dr. Atul Gawande. He's here in person, going to tell us about the devastation wrought from the disappearance of USAID. A few more programming notes on January 20th from 12 to 1. Michelle Wu, the mayor of Boston, will join us. And on Friday, January 30th from noon to 1, Maura Healey, the governor, will join us. That's all at the Boston Public Library. Hello, Jim.
Hey, you mentioned Atul Gawande is going to be here in person at 1 o'clock. We both watched this film,
Oh, my
Venus
gosh.
Choice. One of the most painful things about the impact of, in our name, the destruction of USAID and food programs around the world that, according to a researcher at BU, are killing hundreds of thousands of people already.
It's horrifying, and the Trump administration, again, is lying about what's happened there.
In any case, when Trump won the White House again, he was voted in on the campaign promise of doing something about illegal immigration in America. And for the first time in decades, more migrants left the U.S. than entered in 2025, not just from Trump's deportation efforts, but his broad closure of the border with Mexico, visa restrictions, and the end of migrant humanitarian programs. He's fundamentally changed what legal migration looks like, ripping legal status away from thousands of people in the country. But a year into his second term, ICE's actions, the impacts of the deportations are striking. The American people are realizing that it's not rapists and murderers who he is going after. We've seen illegal chokeholds to break into vehicles. And in the case of Renee Good, obviously in Minneapolis, shooting people to death. A new survey, this is going to be a hopeful, primarily couple of minutes here, from Quinnipiac, conducted in the days after Good's death, shows 57% of American voters are against the way immigration agents are conducting Trump's crackdown agenda. A new poll from The Economist YouGov shows that nearly 8 in 10 Democrats support abolishing ICE altogether. 47% of independents agree, only 14% of Republicans. The lines are open, 877-301-8970 to call or text. Is this a tipping point for America in the time of Trump? Has there been a catalyzation of a spirit of protest and resistance we haven't seen since the days of George Floyd? And if you voted for Donald Trump, please give us a buzz or a text and say whether or not, especially if you voted for him because of his immigration promises, how are you feeling exactly 12 months into Trump 2.0? The number is 877-301-8970.
Well, there have been all sorts of developments. Joe Rogan, the most popular podcaster in America, who helped elect Donald Trump, he endorsed him shortly after. He did a very 3-hour interview, I think, with Trump. Has been criticizing the immigration tactics right along. He basically talked about the Gestapo tactics. I'm paraphrasing. This is what we've come to, that people are going to be stopped to ask to show their papers. Is this what we've come to? Oh, yeah, we should play the clip in just a second. But I just want to finish before we play the clip, that also 3 Native Americans were, Native Americans have been here for a while, I think. They were stopped and arrested. And, we talk about the 2 news groups in America, those who are fact-based and those who are propaganda-based. This guy, David Marcus, was on Fox News, really seeming to think this whole problem in Minneapolis was the fault of a bunch of, quote, organized gangs of wine moms, unquote, who are plotting these criminal conspiracies. Self-important white women, I guess that would be somebody like me, Jim, I'm a self-important white woman.
You are.
That, and he said, and he seemed to threaten them by warning these self-important white women, if we simply allow these cosplaying, is that how you pronounce it? Cosplaying would-be revolutionaries to do whatever they want, Renee Good will not be the last to needlessly die.
That's great.
I think that's where a lot of people are listening to Fox News. And then, of course, we have this guy on CBS who I think is sort of a very disappointingly not a straightforward newsman either.
He had a horrible first week in the ratings.
Horrible,
so
embarrassing
American people
first
are
week.
more discriminating than we think.
Good.
Let's play this Rogan sound. This is Joe Rogan, as Marjorie said, comparing ICE to the Gestapo. Here it is.
You don't want militarized people in the streets just roaming around, snatching people up, many of which turn out to actually be U.S. citizens that just don't have their papers on them. Are we really going to be the Gestapo? Where's your papers? Is that what we've come to?
You know, I mentioned this poll that 57% were critical of how ICE is carrying out the Trump policy. You and I had both the same reaction because we can't be positive about anything. Who are the 40% who think they're doing it well? But let's celebrate.
Trump has shut the border.
57.
He shut the border. Good for him. He shut the border. That's what was concerning people so much. And people coming to their towns and overrunning their towns and worrying about spending money on people when they couldn't afford their own groceries. That's done now, right? That's done now. So I'm not sure that same immigration rallying cry would work anymore because we're seeing what's happening. It is like the Gestapo.
Here's another much more positive, though. The reaction to what was shown in the video that everybody in America has seen, the killing of Renee Good, 52 to 18. 52% think there was a real problem with that, and only 18% are suggesting that it was appropriate. The tipping point here, and I was hoping, if we're right, we may not be right, is the tipping point seems to be cruelty. You know, it's not just the dramatic stuff, like when you watch the execution of a mother of 3 people in Minneapolis.
Or the disabled woman.
When you see every single day a bunch of brawny men in masks shoving a normal person who's protesting, exercising their First Amendment rights, to the ground, almost always face first, slamming their body into the ground, usually 6 or 7 or 5 of these masked guys with their knees in the backs or the legs of these people. I mean, is this, well, it is who we are. Is this who you want us to be?
Well, it's also ProPublica, which is a great news organization. Back in September, the Supreme Court had this decision about basically saying it was okay to racially profile in these situations. And Justice Kavanaugh, rather naively, announced that it wasn't going to be a problem because what would happen is as soon as these ICE agents came and asked for your papers, I mean, I guess we're all supposed to carry around our papers now, it would be no problem. But within a month of what Mother Jones calls Kavanaugh's moronic opinion, ProPublica located 170 American citizens who've been dragged, tackled, beaten, tased, and shot by immigration agents. Their necks have been kneeled on. They've been held outside in the rain in their underwear. Remember that was the Chicago raid?
I do.
Where it turns out that they didn't get any of those rapists and murderers. They weren't, when they dragged the dozens of people out of their apartments in the middle of the night in Chicago. At least 3 of these citizens were pregnant, and agents detained them. And they interviewed people. This guy, Jose Escobar Molina, kidnapped off the street, shoved into Suburban by plainclothes officers who didn't even ask for his ID. And when he told them he had his papers, they responded, "Shut up." B word rhymes with which. I think we all know what that means. They just give all these examples. This other guy was a citizen and a veteran held by the government for 3 days without letting them make a single phone call. He was on his way to work when ICE agents engulfed his car in tear gas, smashed his driver's side window, and pepper sprayed his face. I mean, it just goes on and on and on and on and on.
Coda in Boston texts, this feels like a Rubicon which may have been crossed. I want to point out, and this is an important point, I think these incredible nonviolent protest efforts are so reassuring. Mary in Mansfield, you are first on BPR. Welcome to the show. Hi.
Hi. I just heard something so exciting. Seth Moulton is proposing a bill to take ICE funding back to the $10 million it used to be, because now it's at billions of dollars.
Yeah.
And I think that's brilliant, and I hope it passes. I mean, the guy should run for president. He's like, that's genius. This is what we really need, is to like get their funding back to what it should be.
Mary, I don't want to do what's a pop your balloon. I'd prefer a proposal that has a chance of passing. This, I mean, with all due respect to Congressman Moulton, and I know it's totally well-intentioned, and I celebrate that, there is zero chance that they're going to cut ICE funding to almost nothing when the vast majority of Republicans aren't even troubled by what appears to be the murder of a mother in Minneapolis. I think, like that first texter said, Mary, what you should be celebrating, which I have been mourning about until it happened, is tens, if not hundreds of thousands of people, ordinary people, have taken to the streets across this country, including here in Boston. That's pretty heartening, don't you think?
Yes, I agree with that. We should have that, but at least to attempt to take their funding away. That's important, because as long as they have their funding, they can do this.
I agree.
If you take their money away, they can't do it. So
I agree.
Trying to get their money out from under them and then have it on the books.
Mary, thanks.
Who's for their money?
The answer is, I would say the vast majority of Republicans and a lot of Democrats, sadly, are for their funding. But we appreciate your opinion. Mary, thank you for the call. 877-301-8970. Can we play some sound from a real person? Here's Patty O'Keefe, a Minneapolis resident, interviewed by Minnesota Public Radio about their encounter with ICE this week.
As soon as I was put into my car, I was with 3 ICE agents. They immediately started taunting me, mocking me. They took a picture of me. They called me ugly. The driver of the vehicle, the ICE agent that had pepper sprayed into the vents of my car, said, "You guys got to stop obstructing us. That's why that lesbian is dead." Verbatim. Speaking about Renee Good, which filled me with absolute rage and shock that you could say that to one of her neighbors.
What do you make of that?
Well, after Renee Good was shot in the face, somebody, I don't know if it was the agent that shot her, but there was recording on his cell phone saying she was a effing
B
word.
She was.
And she was dead.
Yeah. Jennifer and Chelsea, welcome to the show. Thanks for calling. Hi.
Oh, hi, Jim. Hi, Marjorie.
Hi.
Hi. Oh, sorry. Yes, I was just calling to say that I'm amazed that not more than 50 to 57% of Americans are outraged.
I am too. I am too.
That's really tough to me, because I think it's all wrong. I'm all for getting drug dealers and murderers out of the country if they're here illegally, but these folks, these normal, hardworking, everyday folks looking for a better life, being treated like this, and then to have our own citizens and what happened in Milwaukee occur, it's just beyond the pale, and I just don't understand why all Americans aren't outraged.
I'm with you, Jennifer. Thanks.
And I think what is the estimate now that about 70% of the people that are taken by ICE, they came over the border illegally. That's what they did that was wrong. That's a civil offense. If you
really
get deported,
important you keep saying that, by the way. It is not a crime.
It's not a crime. If you get deported and come back, that becomes a crime. But if you come over the border illegally the first time, it's a civil offense. And I think that 30% of them, unless something has changed, are people with crimes in the United States, like these, rapes and murders and assault and battery and all that kind of stuff.
Well, 30% are crimes.
Crimes.
Not mostly like rapes and murders like Trump says.
That's right.
They're crimes.
There might be assault and battery. They might be
exactly.
They might be violating a restraining order. They might be shoplifting.
Right. And by the way, neither of us are saying those are insignificant. Some of them are not a legitimate basis for deportation. But this rapist and murderer BS that Trump continues to say is ridiculous. Here's an anonymous text. This is a good one. I don't think you should be asking if this is a tipping point for the general population, because that happened months ago. You should be asking if this is a tipping point for the Republicans in Congress, and God, I hope so.
Well, in the same poll that you talked about before, this YouGov survey, didn't it say 61% of the GOP is okay with the shooting? So it's not a tipping point for them. 88% of Democrats say it's not okay. 58% of independents say it's not okay. So you got to say to yourself, what's going on if you think that that's okay. No matter whether you say she didn't turn her wheels fast enough or not, the second and third shots were right through the open window.
I agree with that, and that's what Judge Gertner said yesterday. But I'd go back to the first shot. I have really tried to, understand the argument that, obviously Trump lied when he did that Truth Social thing about she viciously ran over the ICE agent, killing good because of what she did in the worst interpretation is a wild, and I would argue, criminal overreaction.
Yeah, you're not supposed to get in front of the car, and you're supposed to let the person, you're supposed to let her go.
He put himself in that's a wonderful point in terms of all their policies and protocols.
Well, you heard the chief of police in Minnesota say that.
He's fabulous. He is really, in Minneapolis.
Excuse me, you're not supposed to put yourself in front of the car. And in any case, they had her license plate. They saw the car she was in. And the safety issue, as it was, the car accelerated and rammed into a parked car. That car could have continued to accelerate, and who knows what could have happened. Run over somebody walking on the sidewalk.
Mike, I'm sorry.
I'm just going to say
One second, Mike, don't go away.
Our colleagues at NPR did this really interesting story about how we want to be the moral leader of the world, but fewer than ever think that is true. In the nationwide survey, 61% of respondents said the U.S. should be a moral leader. Only 39% it actually is one. That is sharply down from the 60% who said we were when Trump first took office. And you do say to yourself, it's difficult to be a moral leader in the world when the leader of the country, is a con man and a crook and a tax evader and a sex offender and a compulsive liar and a narcissist.
Left out felon.
Felon.
Mike and JP, welcome to the show. Hi.
Among other things, guys. Yeah, thank you very much for taking my call.
Sure.
I would love to hear you guys in the future ask Democratic representatives why they aren't doing essentially what Sheriff Rochelle Bilal said in Philadelphia, which is to assume that anyone putting on a mask, not identifying themselves, grabbing people off the streets is a criminal kidnapper, and threaten to send the police after them. And also to ask them why they aren't saying that we can find ICE through payroll after the fact. Those would be two huge
Wait, what's
concerns.
the second one? I didn't get the second one. I understand what was the payroll thing?
We can identify ICE, DHS, Customs and Border Patrol, even if they're masked through payroll. It's a process, but it's definitely something we can do, and it's a deterrent if we if our Democratic representatives are willing to actually get out there and say those two things.
Mike, thanks for the call. The Philadelphia sheriff, have you seen her on TV?
No.
She's quite something. Philadelphia sheriff said ICE agents, quote, made up, fake, wannabe law enforcement. That was a couple of days ago.
Well, a lot of them seem to have big-time anger issues, that's for sure.
You think so?
All about policing now is all about de-escalation. We've been talking about this for years now. But the mask thing haven't we heard from, we have no control over the mask thing because they're federal. There's nothing.
I have to say, though, I'm with California. California passed a law saying no law enforcement person, federal or otherwise, could wear a mask. It's probably unenforceable against the feds. Symbolically, I think that matters. It makes a statement on behalf of the people. I think we should be doing that here. Could you mention what you said to me before about the training and why it's 47 days?
Oh, because
I didn't know this till you told me.
Because President Trump is the 47th president, and he thought that would be a fitting, 47th president, 47 days.
And it used to be 6 months, right? The training was 6 months. Now it's down to 47 days.
I don't know how long it used to be.
I'm pretty sure. Elias, you're in Boston. You're on BPR. Welcome to the show. Hi.
Hi, thank you so much.
Sure.
I really appreciate you guys. I wanted to mention, I'm a 50-year-old American citizen. I was an immigrant at age 5, and I've been reliving serious childhood trauma over the past year from my days as an immigrant, and I've never had to experience what I see going on in our country this past year. And I just implore anybody who still supports Trump, who thinks that this is immigration enforcement, to think about this, that most legal immigrants came here legally, and we support legal immigration and support enforcement. We want people to come here legally, and we don't like it when illegal people get here easily. But what's going on now is it's a cover story. It's not immigration enforcement. You got to see the videos and read the stories of what's really going on. They are terrorizing communities. And the children in those communities are never going to recover from this. And if we don't stop it soon, I don't know what's going to happen to this country. It's really, really bad.
Elias, I'm embarrassed that we never said what you said about the kids who are living in these communities, because we don't see them interviewed, and obviously most parents won't put them on camera. That's a wonderful and a hugely important point, and I'm glad you made it. I mean, the trauma of this. By the way, as Elias is speaking, CNN is replaying this image of these ICE agents dragging out of a car a woman who says she's disabled. She was in the neighborhood, this is Minneapolis, to see it was Minneapolis, right?
Yeah, they cut her
to see a doctor. They literally drag her forcibly out of the car.
Look at this. Look at this. There's 6 or 7 ICE agents with one
leaning
guy
on top of this person, face down on the street.
I know.
In the cement.
It's unbelievable.
Elias, thanks for the call. We also forgot to mention, since we were trying to say there were some good developments here, you see the U.S. Attorney Assistant, or whatever the hell he is, had to apologize to the court for deporting that Babson student to Honduras, saying they made a mistake. And obviously that doesn't fix the situation. Judge Stern said, thank you for making that acknowledgement. That doesn't help the woman. So I hope that the judge goes further than just saying he appreciates the honesty.
Well, the judge suggested that she get a student visa, but we don't know if that's going to happen. But it's incredible they actually apologize. That almost never happens for goofing things up.
We also didn't
remember
mention
the last guy that apologized for goofing things up.
Fired.
He got fired in about 2 seconds.
By the way, we also failed to mention something that was in advance of the story that Nancy Gertner mentioned, Judge Gertner mentioned on our show yesterday. As of the moment, 6 or 7 members of the U.S. Attorney's Office in Minneapolis have resigned, which I think is huge. A number of people in the U.S. in the Department of Justice's Civil Rights Division have resigned their jobs, some of them being the leaders in their office. In fact, one of the people who resigned in Minnesota was the leader of the so-called fraud investigation in Minnesota.
And by the way, most of the Somalis alleged to have committed the crime are now U.S. citizens.
92% of the Somalis in Minnesota.
Did you say why he resigned?
No.
Because they wanted to investigate the widow of Renee Good.
Right.
They can't investigate the
Her
ICE
wife,
guy.
not the ICE guy. There's no reason to investigate
him. We're going to investigate the widow.
Point.
Anyway, you're listening to BPR on GBH and NEPN live from the Boston Public Library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Our number is 877-301-8970. If you want to talk about this, immigration is what we're talking about.
I'm Jared Bowen. Coming up on The Culture Show, now that the Michelin Guide has put Boston on the map, star chef Karen Akunowitz is shining even brighter. Her South Boston restaurants both earned Bib Gourmand honors, putting her bold, inventive Italian approach on a much bigger stage. Akunowitz joins us to talk about the ripple effects of recognition, how kitchens keep their stride when the spotlight widens, and what this moment means for Boston. That and more on The Culture Show today at 2 on GBH 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you and the Boston Symphony Orchestra. This month, the E Pluribus Unum Festival explores American music, history, and ideals through performances and in-depth conversations at Symphony Hall and around Greater Boston. BSO.org. And the University of Massachusetts Amherst. UMass, the state's flagship public research university, empowers students to be the future in the pursuit of progress for Massachusetts and beyond. More at umass.edu.
Welcome back to BPR and GBH and NEPM. Marjorie Egan, Jim Browdy, live from the library, stream at youtube.com/GBH News. At noon today, Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley is going to zoom in primarily to talk about what happened in Minneapolis. 1 o'clock in person, Dr. Atul Gawande to talk about this is just unimaginable, hundreds of thousands of deaths around the world already as a result of the ending of funding by our government for USAID. If you're just tuning in, we're talking about Trump's immigration agenda, killing of Renee Good, and what seems to be a dramatic turning of the tide in terms of the American people's support for Trump on one of the key issues in his election a year plus ago, immigration. 877-301-8970. We're looking for your reactions.
We do have some texters who think ICE is doing a great job, so I don't know what their deal is, but that's what they think.
Well, that's what they say they think. I mean, again, there's a lot of trolling here. And if you really think that, as always, other than that guy who called last week and dropped, an F-bomb on the show, give us a call and have a discussion with us. We're happy to have it. John and Gardner. Hi, John.
Hi, guys. I don't want to go through every ounce of that shooting, but I thought the most basic... I've had gun training with the Department of Correction.
We know.
The most important thing, is the background in the shooting. If you look at that film again, that guy came about 2 feet from shooting his own partner in the head. You're supposed to make sure you have a clear background when you're...
Oh,
we lost you, John.
Let's put John on hold and see if he remakes a connection. And as John said, we've known John for a long time. He has a history in law enforcement. Rebecca in Florida, welcome. Hi.
Hey, guys.
Hi.
I'm a daily listener. I like to text in about silly things like Dickies and Harriet Heinemann.
I know.
Yeah. However, this made me angry enough to call in rather than text.
Good.
Because, and I'm not in the unique here, but like my best friend is of Hispanic heritage, and she has brown skin, and she's totally an American citizen, right? And she's afraid to go to Walmart. She's afraid to go to Home Depot. Like, I have to go with her. And she's done nothing wrong, and her citizenship isn't questionable, but she's scared. And you guys say this all the time, but it's true. It's like this is a scare tactic. An administration of like making people feel badly and afraid. And I don't have anything, significant to offer. Just it's scary for all of us.
No, I'm so glad you called, Rebecca. I think that's really important for people to hear.
Well, when we have Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley here, we're going to ask her about Boston. If we should be worried here that these ICE agents are going to come to Boston. Obviously, they're not dealing with the supposed reason that they're there, which is the fraud stuff.
Mm-hmm.
That is not. It's like when they claimed that Venezuela was about the drugs. Now we know it's about the oil, and they're claiming they sent them there about the Somali fraud thing, and now we know it's not that.
Well, not only do we know it's not, because it's all about the terror that they're creating in the streets of Minneapolis. People, I assume, have learned these numbers. I did in the last few days. There are roughly 600 police officers in Minneapolis. There are 5 times as many ICE agents, 3,000 ICE agents, 5 times as many cops, theoretically, as you say there, because of the fraud in the public welfare.
And the chief of police in Minneapolis pointed out that they've been trying to build up the department after the George Floyd killing by a police officer years ago, and he's very upset about what's happening. So, so there's 600 cops, 2,000 agents.
3. They added 1,000.
3,000. So they're outnumbered.
5 to 1.
5 to 1.
Our buddy John is back, apparently with a good connection. Hi, John.
Hi, you guys hear me all right?
Perfectly,
yes.
Thanks.
Okay. Back up a little bit. When the gal was saying, I'm not mad at you, dude, I think she was taunting him. And that he took that personal. So there's a personal element in this. But the thing is, he did not have a clear background in the shooting.
John, by the way, that was said to the other cop. And the other cop's reaction, even if she was taunting him, was, get the F out of the car. Now,
I'm saying, Jim, that
You go ahead.
She could have been... So what if she was taunting him?
Exactly.
And it was the guy with the stick, with the camera, and that was the shooter. But anyway,
I didn't think so, but okay.
It's personal in my opinion. You're duty bound to provide medical assistance. Did anybody see anybody moving towards him other than the guy strolling up?
Well, no. In fact, there was a doctor across the street who offered his services, and they rejected. And I understand the concerns. How do you know he's a doctor, et cetera? Check his documents. What was it, 7 minutes before the medics
before they got there
came?
Just because I was a reporter for years before I started doing this, I've been to so many demonstrations over the years, and protesters are often taunting the cops. They're throwing water bottles at the cops. They're calling the cops names. They're doing all these things, and cops sometimes do react over over the top, but most of the time, they put up with a lot before they ever...
Well, do you hear what your friend, the Minneapolis police chief, said about exactly that? Our job, regardless, is to protect those protesters, even if they are taunting us. Do you have a final thought, John?
Yeah, there's several other things I would have, but look for this, the autopsy. And they didn't secure that crime scene. You watch going forward with whatever investigations they do or they do not do, watch for the autopsy and the excuse of not securing the crime scene. But there are so many other things that indicate bad training. Thanks, guys.
Thanks. By the way, the point about the autopsy, which was made by Judge Gertner yesterday, well, people, maybe can argue that first shot, I don't buy it, can argue that first shot was self-defense. Again, I don't subscribe to that at all. The second and third shots, if it turns out they were the one or both of them were what killed Renee Good, as Nancy Gertner said yesterday, there's absolutely no question that any semi-sane person could make that she was not murdered by this ICE guy. So, thanks for your calls.
Things are good in Minneapolis.
Can you imagine?
No, I just hope nobody comes here.
Well, you know, when we have Mayor Wu next week, I'm sure they're preparing for the worst case scenario. What happened? We have 2,000 cops. So by that thing, what if they sent 10,000 ICE agents here, 5 times as many as we have cops? What do we do?
I don't know. We're in a very open space here at the Boston Public Library, Jim.
It's not all about us, even though I think usually it is.
Coming up after the quick break, the Culture Show's Jared Bowen is going to join us. He's going to tell us about Bradley Cooper's new movie and this South Korean boy band that has just taken the world by storm with this tour. They're going to go to Gillette Stadium. We're going to hear all about that and them. I'm Marjorie Egan. He's Jim Browder. You're listening to BPR and GBH and NEPM live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
There are thousands of oil tankers sailing the high seas. It's nearly impossible to know who owns some of them.
And the reason that the true owner goes to such great lengths to be concealed is because often the true owner is the Kremlin.
It's part of Russia's strategy to evade international sanctions. Hear that story next time on The World.
This afternoon at 3, here on GBH News 89.7.
Support for GBH comes from you.
And Mass Humanities, presenting Voices and Votes, Democracy in America, a Smithsonian exhibition in East Sandwich now through January 30th, in collaboration with Massachusetts 250, masshumanities.org. And the Museum of Science, featuring exhibits for all ages, from indoor lightning storms to live animals to modern robotics and hands-on design challenges. More at mos.org.
Welcome back to BPR and GBH and NEPM. Marjorie Egan, Jim Browder, live from the library, streaming youtube.com/GBH News. In about 30 minutes, Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley will zoom in, 1 o'clock in person. I think it's fair to say one of the most important leaders in humanitarian justice in the world, Dr. Atul Gawande, is going to join us about what the consequences of the destruction of USAID have been. And he has a film, a short documentary that he has made about a woman and her young child in South Sudan and Kenya that is one of the most powerful and painful things I've ever seen in my life. It's 22 minutes. It's on the New Yorker website. You should check it out. But first, we're joined at the library desk by GBH News Executive Arts Editor and host of The Culture Show, which airs daily here on 89.7 at 2 p.m. And for our friends in Western Mass, they can get their dose of Jared and Company Saturdays at 7 p.m. on 88.5 NEPM. Hello, Jared Bowen.
Hello, Jared Bowen.
Hey there.
So let's start with a little sound from this South Korean boy band BTS, which has taken the whole world by storm, apparently. Here is their big English language hit, Dynamite. Okay, so they're coming to Gillette next summer, I guess.
August.
Is it August?
This coming summer, yeah.
This coming summer, next summer, or this coming summer, I should say. So what's the deal?
This is such a huge phenomenon, and it only gets bigger and bigger and bigger. I think we're reminded of this with K-pop Demon Hunters, the big Netflix movie last year. The Hallyu, which is the word that describes this Korean wave, the pop culture wave from South Korea, just continues and continues and continues to build. And this is really exceptional because BTS is this major boy band, really now a man band, because they've grown up. And they were so successful the world over, and then people wondered what would happen when they disappeared. The reason they disappeared is because they have compulsory military service in South Korea, and each of the 7 members had to serve their service for 18 months. The last member got out last year, which has given them now time to create this new album. We'll learn more about that in the coming months. But before even the album, they've announced this major tour, 79 shows, 34 regions, including their first time here at Gillette on August 5th and 6th. And if anybody had any question about their popularity and whether it would wane while they had disappeared from the scene, not the case, because people are so excited about this.
You know, I read a piece about them, I think in the New York Times yesterday, from a bunch of years ago. And apparently what's as interesting a story as the boy band itself, or the young man band itself now, is their army, as they're called, their fandom, who do good things in the spirit of the band. And well, tell us about it. By the way, they're called the Army, and I looked it up. It stands for Adorable Representatives MC for Youth. That's what Army stands for. So tell us about the Army.
Well, this has been part of building this industry, and it is an industry. It's basically Hollywood in South Korea, because they recognized a number of years ago that when the country was experiencing widespread economic downturn, that if they got into the cosmetics business and the entertainment business, they could have a huge export on their hands, and that's exactly what happened. But part of building that was building this fandom, or in this case, the BTS case, the Army, where there's basically a whole system that develops, because you have the icons, these figures in their costumes, so it's all about the staging, it's all about the appearance and the dress, and then it's about cultivating this fandom and having them carry this message forward. And again, like everything else, it left South Korea so that they have people like this all around, all of their fans all around the world.
By the way, we will be having all 7 of them on when they're at Gillette in August. Sure. I meant to say that's coming soon.
Okay.
By the way, they're going to make $1 billion, they figure. At least $1 billion with this tour, between the merchandising, the touring. It's going to be...
Well, Taylor Swift made billions, didn't
it's going to be the Taylor Swift effect, that they will stop wherever... They will stop and generate a new economy wherever they go.
In each community, yeah. Okay.
Okay, so we're going to play a clip.
I'm dying to see this movie, by the way.
Yeah, it's a little bleak. I mean, I'm not wild about divorce movies, you know, because
no,
they're very
you don't
tough.
love those.
No, I don't, especially when they get children involved.
Kramer versus Kramer, you didn't like?
No, because they're often so sad.
Okay, is this thing?
But anyway, we're going to play a little clip because Bradley Cooper's he's the director, I guess, and he's got a partial role. So anyway, here's the clip from Is This Thing On? Alex Novak is played by Will Arnett. He's telling his family now that he started doing stand-up comedy.
I'm one of the guys going up. What? I've been doing open mic nights.
What's an open mic?
I just got a call that one of the comics who's emceeing at the club tonight, they agreed to give me 10 minutes on stage. I'm one of the acts, one of the comedy acts.
You?
Yeah, me.
Well, so I don't know. What do you do? You tell jokes?
I mean, sort of more like funny stories about my life.
What's funny about your life?
I had no idea your life was so bad.
No, it's not so bad.
This is why she threw you out.
By the way, those are his kids responding in the beginning, and then his father, and then his mother.
Laura Dern is the mom, right?
Right, who I love. Who the sound bites don't make it. This makes it. The trailer on TV is fabulous.
So it's a comedy divorce movie. Is this what this is?
Yeah. So I'm happy to tell you that you can go see this one, and you won't have the Kramer versus Kramer
Okay,
effect.
that was brutal.
Yeah.
Then the one about the whale. What was the one about the whale? That was a really brutal one too.
Squid in the Whale.
Squid in the Whale.
Right.
Thank you, John, who knows everything.
Okay, go ahead.
So this is a different take on this, because you have a couple who's married about 20 years. Again, Laura Dern and Will Arnett, and basically very quietly one day, their marriage comes apart. This comes at the very beginning of the film. And he finds himself living alone in an apartment in New York, stumbles into a comedy club one day to not pay the admission fee. He agrees to take an open mic and starts using it almost as therapy. He's not a comedian. He's not telling rat-a-tat jokes, but he's telling his story and basically his take on what it means to be a divorced man and why he's suddenly divorced.
Oh, no.
And this is based on a real story. So Will Arnett, years ago, was aware of this man in Great Britain. He was a pharmaceutical rep who, again, just like his character in this film, nursing his wounds, did this and then ended up getting somewhat of a successful stand-up career out of this. Well, it turns out Will Arnett and Bradley Cooper have been friends for a very long time. Bradley Cooper was looking for the next piece to direct or had heard this story and thought there was certainly material here. So this is his third directorial effort after A Star Is Born and after Leonard Bernstein. So there's, I think, a through line
Maestro,
here in terms
I forgot
of
about that, right.
So there's a through line here about performances, or about performers and what art means in these situations. But it's not a rancorous marriage. There's no fighting about the children. This is about two people, again, 20 years into their marriage, trying to figure out what life is, and maybe life means actually coming back together. So this is what we see each of them working through.
Okay, remember the marriage? The other one was a Marriage Story with Adam Driver. Remember that?
Ooh,
and
that was
Scarlett
tough.
Johansson. Oh my God!
Yeah. So there's a great
like
line
on the floor, writhing in pain.
in the New York Times Review. This is really talk about a killer line in a movie. So when Alex, that's Will Arnett, asked Tess, Laura Dern, at one point, if the story she's relating to their friends about their breakup is about him, she snaps back, no, it's about somebody alive.
Yeah, it's a little tough.
Wow.
Oh, God.
Oh, my God.
Okay.
That is pretty tough.
Remember War of the Roses? That was the other
Oh, that was the other one.
That was ferocious.
Oh, remember there's at the end where they're swinging from the chandelier like about 40 feet above the ground? Oh,
No.
my God.
And by the way, Bradley Cooper is in this movie. He
love
gives
him.
himself a small part. He's hilarious. He's
Is he?
such a great comedian as well because he plays this actor friend who's a little bit unaware of how actorly he is and how he perceives himself. So it's very funny.
I loved him in A Star Is Born.
Yeah.
That was another upbeat flick.
That was rather depressing. I've seen, I think, I've seen every Star. How many are there? 5 stars?
There are many. I can't remember.
Okay, so
Judy Garland from a million years ago.
Let me ask you a question, Jared, since you're precise with your language. Is it acceptable to say we almost had Bradley Cooper on the show when it turns out he was booked, and after we were so excited we almost couldn't see straight, he canceled 5 minutes later?
He did?
Does that count as almost having him on the show, or no?
That does not count.
Does not count. I think
I was involved in that. That sounds very familiar.
Maybe you were hosting.
I think
that
I was
day
filling
or
in. I know it was
something.
during
Yeah,
the
we
summer.
almost had him, but we didn't.
Yeah.
I guess we almost had Marlon Brando too, but we didn't. He didn't.
I don't think we had Marlon
No, we
Brando.
didn't.
No.
Well, we didn't have Bradley Cooper
Well,
either.
we did have we have had a couple of famous people though over the years.
Yeah.
Yeah, Barack Obama.
Yeah, he's fairly famous.
He was fairly famous.
Yeah.
And then we had the guy from CNN that you love, the chef.
Anthony Bourdain.
Anthony Bourdain.
The chef from CNN.
Well, he's a wonderful. He had a great show on CNN. They're replaying some of his shows. I think.
I'm not crazy about that.
Yeah, it's
by
hard
the
to
way.
look at them now, isn't it? A little bit.
Well,
When he's
also
no
when you know
longer-
he died by suicide
I
too.
know
It's
he's
even,
no longer
it's
he's no longer
even
with us.
harder.
Okay, so
I thought I'd like to have Cher on the show. Does that count as almost having Cher on the show?
Did you try?
We haven't tried yet, but she has her book coming out. The second part of her memoir coming out this year. She's our sort of patron saint with
Can I tell you,
now
I've
revealing
spoken to a
inside
bunch of
stuff.
people who were at the fundraiser she did in Provincetown. I think it was for Kamala Harris. Maybe it was the prior campaign, and she was the headliner. And people say it was the event. Every person with whom I've spoken said it was the event of their lifetime because of her, because she was such a monster, incredible.
Yeah,
presence.
she's really something. She's really something. She's great. Anyway, so I watched this Breaking the Deadlock on PBS. It's a very interesting concept, and a lot of big names are on the show. Walter Isaacson, Mitch Landrieu used to be the mayor, the governor, or something
New
in
Orleans.
Louisiana.
Yep.
Yeah, Rick
Chris
Wilson
Christie.
for the Lincoln Project. Yeah. So what's the deal with Breaking the Deadlock?
I don't even know what it is. What is it?
I find this show really fascinating. I would describe it as an occasional PBS show where periodically they're assembling a group of people, just like Marjorie was just talking about, ideological spectrum, and then with some journalists or commentators like Ann Coulter thrown in, or Walter Isaacson,
where's
the
she
biographer.
Gone? She's like disappeared.
She has a Substack, and I believe it's Substack, and she has a big social media presence, so she's very much in the social media digital realm now. She was one of the participants in one of the shows I watched. But it actually stems from the Fred Friendly seminar series that was on PBS years ago, and it was all about ethics, and people kind of look back at it now in the 1980s thinking this was this dry distillation of events. But there is a through line here. So they gather all of these figures together for this hour-long show. It's moderated by Aaron Tang, who is a law professor at UC Davis, and they have no idea what they're walking into, and he gives them a scenario. So in the upcoming episode, which airs next Tuesday, January 20th, it's all about reproductive rights and the right to die. So as they're all seated, Aaron Tang gives them a scenario such as your daughter is coming home with her best friend who would like to terminate her pregnancy. And then it begins to unfold and it begins to build. But the whole point of this exercise is that you can bring all of these people with different backgrounds that we, at this point in our society, believe would tear each other's throats out when faced with a conflict like this or a controversy like this. But here around this table, they have a very civilized discussion. That's not to say that emotion doesn't come to the surface. I have watched this upcoming episode, and it certainly does. I think this gets people to be the most introspective and the most personal about their perspectives. But it gives us reason for hope in this climate that people can come together. And they're all people who are very much participating in the world right now, the former politicians or current politicians, or people like Ann Coulter, who every day are out there in the public sphere having civil discourse.
You know what, it sounds a little bit, I haven't seen it, unlike you. First of all, I hear there are 12 panelists, and I haven't seen it. To me, it's too many. Is it too many?
It doesn't feel...
Really?
We would all, because we all work in this realm, we would think so, but it doesn't end up bearing out that way.
You know what it sounds a little bit like? And I don't know if people remember. After Chris Lydon's brilliant 10 o'clock news with Carmen Fields and others was canceled here, remember the show? I was never on it. You were. The Group. The Group was this incredible show where the camera just started, came on to a bunch of 6 people, I think it was. Where there
4
was,
people.
There was no, it was more than that.
4 people.
Okay, no moderator.
We all had cocktails before. They wanted you to drink beforehand.
You know, when I started Greater Boston, that was my request to the bosses, that on my honor, that people be able to drink.
That was the best thing ever.
So the camera comes in, the conversation has already started. There's no moderator for the discussion. Did you see? You saw that show, right?
I have seen show, and a little aside, the booker for that show is the one who hired me at GBH.
Is that true?
Many years ago.
Who was that?
Susan Mayer.
Oh my God.
Susan Mayer, she was terrific. I loved her. But the thing about the Group, I was at the Herald then, and I was totally broke, because my ex-husband was at the Globe, and reporters don't make any money. They would pay you $200 for every time you came on that show.
That was real money in those days.
Every time they called, I got in my car and I whizzed there as fast as I can, had a scotch on the rocks, and sat down there. And that was the danger, that if you were someone who had a drinking problem, that you might go off the deep end during the show because you would.
That.
Yeah, I mean, people's inhibitions are loosened, right? When you have a couple of drinks.
That was the point, wasn't it?
That was the point, and so. I loved it. I was devastated.
Can I say one more thing? I don't know if
on my first vacation with my money from the Group.
Chris Lydon may have said this on our show, but he may have said it elsewhere. After his show's canceled, which was one of the great... how I was introduced to Boston was through the 10 o'clock news. That's how I learned about the city. It was fabulous. Obviously on Channel 2 here. Is the Group, which succeeded him.
He made fun of it.
His great quote was, he wants his epitaph on his tombstone to say, "Here lies Chris Lydon. He never appeared on the Group." That's which I thought was pretty great.
In fairness, the 10 o'clock news was a much better production than the Group.
Great show.
Like I said, $200 a shot.
And I'll say Susan Mayer was a big foodie. She had a restaurant in Nantucket at one point. So she understood the power, because I think they also had cheese, right? They had a cheese plate.
Hors d'oeuvres. It was great. You'd eat your dinner.
So she understood the power of lubricating people to get them to have a very productive conversation.
Yeah.
But I would really encourage people to check this show out. And all the past episodes are available streaming via PBS, I believe also Amazon and the PBS app. It really gave me hope about the fact that we can come together if we try and have discipline.
Now, before we leave the subject, how come you were never on the Group, Jim?
Well, I asked that question quite a bit, actually. We weren't here. We weren't at the GBH yet.
No.
I would say if you had a list like 100 commentators in Boston, I would say 99 of them were on the Group at one time or another. And as far as I know, one was not.
But wait, if we apply the Bradley Cooper logic, because you wanted to be on the Group, were you on the Group?
Okay.
I never got to 200. I was never invited on the group. We're talking to Jared Bowen, obviously.
Tell us about Shakespeare and Company's Tina Packer, who just passed away, I believe at 87.
87 years
Yes.
old. She was an extraordinary force. I had the privilege of interacting with her many times over the years, especially when, of course, covering Shakespeare and Company. If people don't know, it is one of the major cultural institutions out in the Berkshires. They have outdoor theater space, indoor theater space. This is how they grew, so it was no longer just a summer thing. But basically, to back up, she is somebody who, from the age of 8, growing up in England, had an appetite for acting and the stage and performance. Then she went to the Royal Academy of Dramatic Arts in England, graduated, and was in projects with Glenda Jackson and Diana Rigg and Paul Schofield. She was in an episode of Doctor Who and David Copperfield.
Oh, wow.
But very quickly realized in her early years that she had more interest in directing. Flash forward, she, taking the name from the very famous bookstore in Paris, Shakespeare and Company, comes to the United States, goes to the Berkshires, and sees an opportunity to propel forward in this country, co-founds Shakespeare and Company. For many years, they were in residency at the Mount, the Edith Wharton estate. Then they went off onto their own, and they built this major campus. And all throughout, she still continued acting, and then doing things like Shirley Valentine, playing Cleopatra well into it was either her 60s or 70s, directing almost all of Shakespeare's productions there. She taught at Harvard, MIT, Columbia. She produced a book called The Women of Will, because as she went along Shakespeare's career and dove into it, she realized that as Shakespeare developed, his female characters developed, so that by the end of the canon, they're basically always the ones in charge who have great influence. So she spent her career dedicated to performance, especially dedicated to Shakespeare, and was just tireless. And then if you had the opportunity to see her on stage or interact with her, she was just this huge personality, very big, filled rooms, and just had so much light.
Do you know her?
No.
Nor did I.
I wish I did know her.
Yeah, she was spectacular.
But you mentioned that Edith Wharton home up there it's in the Berkshires.
Lenox, yeah.
It is in Lenox, which is an incredible place if people haven't been there.
And it's a great comeback story, too, because for years that was in financial disarray, and people weren't sure whether they could keep it going, and they've turned it around. They've made it a literary landmark, of course, in this country, and now they have all sorts of events all throughout the year. It's a fabulous place to visit, because Edith Wharton considered herself more of an interior designer and gardener than she did a writer of such works as House of Mirth and Age of Innocence.
Age of Innocence, my favorite.
Yeah. How much great stuff is there in Western Mass, by the way?
I love Western Mass.
It is spectacular.
Well, you're always up at MoMA, right?
Not all. I've been there like 3 times.
Jim's a regular.
One of the
Mass MoCA.
Well, you know why I go to Mass MoCA? Oh, right, MoMA's in New York City, Museum of Modern Art. You meant Mass MoCA.
Sorry.
Yeah, I've been there more than I was on the group, actually, by a lot. I think you could say. Now, do you want to do a Great Privation in a minute and a half, or do you want to save it for next week? Take it away.
Okay, Great Privation. This is a show by Company One. It's at the Modern Theater at Suffolk University through January 31st. It's pay what you want, including $0 if you don't have the budget for it. This is a piece that looks at 2 periods in time. We find a black woman and her daughter in 1832 in Philadelphia. They're spending several days guarding a grave because her husband has just died of cholera, and she realizes that she has to guard the grave because, based on actual fact, there was a lot of grave robbing that happened throughout this country, especially of black bodies for medical purposes. So then we have this medical moral question before us. Is it okay to steal a body if it's going to advance humankind in medicine? And then we flash forward to a summer camp where the same actors are playing the mother and daughter, and this time her mother is trying to protect her in a different realm because she's an activist and she's gotten herself in trouble at school. It moves back and forth at time. Despite the subject matter that I've just described, it is a dark comedy. It's extremely funny, extremely well acted. The 2 actors playing mother and daughter have phenomenal chemistry, but it's also a bit of a supernatural horror thriller. All of this comes to the stage. I cannot recommend it enough because it's such different and fresh theater. It's appeared in London, New York, D.C., and now here in Boston. Really
through January
fabulous
31st.
Piece. January 31st.
And you'll come back later and tell us what's on the show.
I will.
You have one of the city's great celebrated chefs. Is she going to be here?
She is going to be here.
Yeah, I would be here for that. That's going to be great.
You going to tell us who?
Karen Akunowitz. And she got two of those bib things from... we'll talk to you right before 2 o'clock. See you,
Jim's a regular over at her places, too.
They're great.
We've been speaking with Jared Bowen, Executive Arts Editor, GBH, host of The Culture Show, which will be live.
I went there right after I was rejected by the group. I went to the group. They said, don't come in. I went right to Bar Volpe. Sorry.
Ayanna Pressley is next. Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley, you're listening to GBH and NEPM from the BPL.
Not over yet. More smart conversation about community issues up ahead with Jim Braude and Marjorie Egan on Boston Public Radio, right after a news update from NPR. Stay with us here on GBH 89.7.
Funding for our programs comes from you. And Speakeasy Stage, presenting Job, the relentless psychological thriller for the digital age. Runs January 16th through February 7th at Speakeasy Stage. SpeakeasyStage.com. Against the backdrop of Mount Kilimanjaro, explore the complex lives of the majestic elephant bulls on the next episode of Nature. Don't miss Tusker, Brotherhood of Elephants. Tonight at 8 on GBH2.
You're listening to 89.7 WGBH HD1 Boston. Online at gbhnews.org. GBH News. What matters to you?
I'm Jim Braude, head on Hour 2 of BPR, live from the library. Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley zooms in to discuss her goals for an independent investigation into the ICE killing in Minnesota and for extended ACA subsidies. Then Tufts international affairs expert Daniel Drezner on violence in Iran, where the death toll of protesters against the regime has soared past 2,500. He'll also tell us what he thinks Trump's threats to Iran might actually mean.
I'm Marjorie Egan. Then food policy analyst Corby Kummer and how Boston's new liquor licenses are improving city nightlife, plus how restoring wild oyster reefs in Massachusetts is a big win for conservationists and seafood bars. It's all next in the second hour of BPR 89.7 GBH, live from the Boston Public Library.
Live from NPR News, I'm Lakshmi Singh. President Trump says anything less than U.S. control of Greenland would be, quote, unacceptable. NPR's Frank Ordonez reports Trump's top aides meet today with foreign ministers of Denmark and Greenland.
President Trump claims the U.S. needs the Arctic territory for national security purposes. In a social media post, Trump argues it could also strengthen the NATO alliance. He wrote, quote, NATO becomes far more formidable and effective with Greenland in the hands of the United States. Danish officials requested the meeting with the administration. Greenland's prime minister says Greenland stands with Denmark and warns that the territory will face a geopolitical crisis if it has to choose between the U.S. and Denmark. Franco Ordonez, NPR News, the White House.
In a standoff over federal immigration enforcement in Minnesota, at least half a dozen veteran assistant U.S. attorneys have resigned. Matt Sepik of Minnesota Public Radio reports Justice Department officials had pressured the lawyers to investigate the widow of a woman killed last week by an ICE agent.
Those who quit include Minnesota U.S. Attorney's Office Criminal Division Chief Melinda Williams and Joe Thompson, the lead fraud prosecutor. According to a person familiar with the situation not authorized to speak publicly, the prosecutors quit over pressure to investigate Becca Good for ties to activist groups, which is protected First Amendment activity. She's the widow of Renee Macklin Good, who was killed by ICE agent Jonathan Ross last week in Minneapolis. The assistant U.S. attorneys also object to the Justice Department's reluctance to investigate Ross. Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche says there's, quote, currently no basis for a criminal civil rights investigation. For NPR News, I'm Matt Sepik in Minneapolis.
The Oglala Sioux tribe in South Dakota is demanding information about tribal members still in ICE custody since they were detained last week in Minneapolis. The tribe's president, Frank Starr, comes out, said in a statement 4 men were picked up at a homeless encampment. He says 1 has been released, 3 remain illegally detained. He says federal officials told the tribe that information about the detained men would be released only if the tribe entered into an agreement with ICE, which the tribe says is not going to happen. 2025 was a lackluster year for home sales, but sales activity picked up in December. Here's NPR's Scott Horsley.
Sales of existing homes rose more than 5% in December compared to the previous month. Mortgage rates have fallen from nearly 7% a year ago to just over 6% today. A new report from the Commerce Department says retail sales picked up in November. Consumer spending at restaurants, stores, and gas stations rose by 0.6% during the month. Thanks to President Trump's tariffs, the U.S. is buying less from China, but China's finding plenty of other buyers around the world. Exports from the world's second largest economy rose 5.5% last year, and China's trade surplus grew to a record $1.2 trillion.
It's NPR.
Good afternoon. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro. Some Worcester residents are urging city leaders to create a civilian review board to oversee the police department. An independent report from last fall by the nonprofit Worcester Regional Research Bureau concluded that an oversight board would increase police accountability. Calls for the panel follow a federal investigation in 2024 that found Worcester police have used excessive force. The police department opposes a civilian review board that says it has since made reforms. But at a city council meeting last night, Sarah Bertrand was among the residents who said more oversight is necessary.
Holding a public-funded institution to a higher standard is not disparaging nor radical. It's what our community deserves and what our community has been asking for decades.
Worcester City Councilors didn't respond to the calls for a civilian review board at the meeting. The wearable fitness tracking company Whoop has launched the Massachusetts AI Coalition, the latest initiative aimed at positioning the Commonwealth as a global leader in artificial intelligence. Boston Business Journal reports that on Monday, officials at Whoop said the company will act as the founding chair of a group of over 16 companies that include both public and private enterprises across the technology, manufacturing, healthcare, consumer, and industrial sectors. Coalition's top priority is to create a world-class AI ecosystem. It is 51 degrees in Boston right now. I'm Henry Santoro. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Progressive. Progressive Commercial Auto Insurance protects the vehicles that work to keep small businesses moving forward, including protection while running errands and other tasks. At progressivecommercial.com.
Welcome to hour number 2 of Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marjorie Egan. We are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. At 1 o'clock, we're going to be joined here at the Boston Public Library by Dr. Atul Gawande. He used to run USAID. He has returned to South
Sudan. The global health part of USAID, yeah.
Yes, and he has returned to South Sudan to see in person with his own eyes what has happened there since we have stopped funding, I think it's fair to say, nearly all of USAID.
Food and other programs,
and it's pretty devastating. He's going to talk to us all about it. On Tuesday, January 20th, between 12 and 1, we're going to be joined by the Mayor of Boston, Michelle Wu. And on Friday, January 30th, we'll be joined by the Governor, also from 12 to 1, and both of them will be at the library. Hello again, Jim.
And right now, well, hello, Marjorie. We are about to be joined by Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley. Last week, moving in the House to subpoena all records and footage relating to the killing of Renee Good. You'll first hear her voice and then the chair of the committee.
This committee is responsible for oversight of federal law enforcement. We must investigate. This subpoena will help us get to the truth, and it should have bipartisan support. And I urge my colleagues to vote yes.
It is a tie, so the motion fails.
Blocked by her Republican colleagues. We're joined now on Zoom by Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley. She represents Massachusetts' 7th District in D.C. for a few minutes before she runs off to a Congressional Progressive Caucus shadow hearing on lowering housing costs. Congresswoman, good to see you.
Congressman, thank you very much for joining us. I know you've been very involved in talking and trying to pass legislation involving what's going on in Minnesota. What do you think about what's happened and what we can be doing?
Well, first, let me just say that, can you all hear me?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. What happened to Renee Good was horrific. An Americans, the residents.
Actually, we can't now, in answer to your question, we don't have a fabulous connection. Can we do something about that on either end?
Maybe you can turn off the video, maybe?
Okay,
I don't know.
We're working on it right now.
We're going to try to get a better connection for the Congresswoman, but she and Senator Ed Markey have introduced a bill that would eliminate a legal principle called absolute immunity that protects federal government employees, including law enforcement, from civil liability. We talked about this a lot during police reform, and they've also, as we just heard, urged a probe into the Minnesota killing. But Republicans rebuffed that motion by the Congresswoman.
Yeah, I want to tie again with all the Republicans on the committee voting no, which is just unimaginable, except for you realize the reason they voted no is because you don't want to upset the President of the United States, who thinks it's more important to criminally investigate the woman who is married to Renee Good than it is the officer who killed her. We are trying to reconnect with Ayanna Pressley, and I assume we will in a couple of seconds to get a
you guys hear me?
Now I think we're good. Congresswoman, thanks for working that out. Continue.
Okay. All right.
Much better.
Yep.
Okay, it's just a bit of an echo on my end, but I'll just keep talking through it.
Yeah, I'm sorry. That's our fault.
Go ahead.
Yeah, no problem. Okay. Look, the point is, what happened to Renee Good in Minnesota, and an unarmed American citizen, a mother, an artist, a concerned community member, a wife, is tragic and traumatizing and terrorizing. Actions of ICE have nothing to do with public safety. And they have everything to do with sowing chaos and terrorizing our communities and separating families. ICE does not care if you are a citizen or undocumented. They don't care if you're black, brown, white, disabled. This harm is coming for everyone. And that is exactly why Congress should be using the power of the purse through appropriations to rein in this rogue agency. But I should say that it's not only about the egregious and vile actions taking place in ICE in broad daylight, like the murder of Renee Good. It's also about what is happening in ICE facility. At least 30 people have died while in the custody of ICE. So I do not believe it is an agency that can be reformed. These were questions that I've been raising and posing for since I was elected to Congress. And of course, Renee Good's tragic situation in Minnesota is not in isolation. There's also a key reporter in Los Angeles, and the Silvario Gonzalez. And so this is why I'm calling for public hearings for transparency and accountability. And we need to subpoena Kristi Noem and Tom Homan. Kristi Noem is incompetent and dangerous. We need to use the power of the purse. And I reintroduced my legislation alongside Senator Markey to end qualified immunity.
You know, Congresswoman, I didn't see the vote, and I'm wondering, when the Republicans all voted no on this, is this just parroting Trump's rapist and murderer line? What arguments do they give as to why what you are doing, which I think is pretty hard to object to, let's subpoena and investigate and get to the truth? I mean, what were their public arguments?
Well, look, in my opinion, Jim, it's just that they are unserious about doing the work of oversight. They want to move with selective outrage and selective oversight. Some took umbrage with the fact that in our request for a subpoena in real time, we had used the word murder. But again, I was trying to talk out of what is so obvious and apparent. They try to talk people out of their experiences every day. Your housing is affordable, groceries are affordable, ICE is making you more safe. I mean, they're just, just because you say a thing over and over again doesn't make it true. So they are very unserious about the work of public safety because ICE is putting everyone in harm's way. And I do mean everyone. And they are unserious about the work of oversight, but it doesn't mean I'm not still going to leverage every tool available to me in my role. And that's why, even though I knew it was possible that the motion would be voted down, that I was still going to make every effort to get it done.
You know, one of the things Marjorie and I were talking a lot about this morning is why, considering there's great animus on the part of the president and Tom Homan for the mayor of Boston, your former colleague on the Boston City Council, the attorney general who's sued him a few dozen times, the governor. One of the successful tactics, and I use the term successful loosely, in Minneapolis is there are 5 times as many ICE agents as there are police officers in Minneapolis. Have you, Mayor Wu, other leaders met and talked about planning if they decide that Boston is to become the next Minneapolis? Are we prepared for this kind of onslaught?
Well, those conversations are ongoing at every level of government. I'm not going to give too much of a sightline into that, just for the purposes of needing to keep those conversations confidential. But those are ongoing conversations always about how do we protect our neighbors and our communities, defend our values. When it comes to obviously anything else from this hostile administration, which seems to have contempt for every person who calls this country home. I mean, Jim, listen, Marjorie, we all get it. Elections have consequences. You know, fine. We don't have a Republican majority in the House, so their majority is very slim. We don't have it in the Senate. They have the White House. And for all intents and purposes, they have the Supreme Court as accomplices in their fascist agenda. But all that being said, you have all this power, and this is how you choose to use it. To exact and enact harm, to terrorize communities, to deny people essential health care. They're very unserious about the work of governance and showing up for the people who sent them here.
We're talking to Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley.
You know, the other thing I think people are very concerned about too, Congresswoman, is what could happen with the elections in 2026, that if you are a person of color or even if you're a U.S. citizen because you're going to go vote, but you might not want to go vote because of fears of kind of a military crackdown on polls in blue districts around the country. Are people talking much about that?
Well, I think there's palpable, incredible fear all around. But look, if you want to defend our democracy, if you want to defend free and fair elections, you have to vote. But I'm certainly very clear about the fact that, especially when it comes to the Black community, they are coming for, they want to take us back to Jim Crow and then some. You know, they're coming for Black body, votes, power, and progress. We're waiting for this decision on voting rights from the Supreme Court. We have to stand up in defense of the Constitution.
You know, you mentioned a second ago healthcare in passing. The House, I have to say I was a bit surprised. 17 Republicans joined Democrats in voting to extend the Obamacare subsidies for 3 years, which to me is not exactly a radical act, but a humane act. The conventional wisdom is it's not going to happen in the Senate. Do you have a more optimistic view than I do?
Well, listen, Jim, to your point, not that your heart is hardened, but you've been disappointed many times. We all have.
Yes, indeed.
In the same way that people did not think that we would be able to effectively move the discharge petition. Let me just say this for the audience. We are doing a lot of practices in government that used to be rarities. You see them weaponizing the practice of censure. You see articles of impeachment being introduced. You see us using a discharge petition to force a vote on things like full release of the Epstein files or extension of the ACA. That is because we have a government under a Republican majority, it's important to note that is dysfunctional, and the people deserve a functioning government. We got to keep fighting, and people keep raising their voices. Because although the majority of our Republican colleagues in the House are more concerned with keeping a job than doing it, some of them are coming to their senses. They are listening to the people who sent them here to represent them. And they understand that things like healthcare are not a nice to have, they're a must have.
Well, so what's the answer to the question, though? Is it possible or likely that there'll be a comparable defection by enough Republicans in the Senate to pass an extension of the Affordable Care Act subsidies and then put Trump right in the cross? I shouldn't use that expression. Put Trump in a really tough political position?
Look, I won't make any predictions, Jim, but we are certainly fighting for that. And again, this is why I think it's important that people continue to call your senators, hold them accountable, make clear what you want from them. Because it has been working. It's taken too long, but it has been working. What I do see happening is that people are moving as people of conscience. They are voting with Democrats on these deeply consequential measures. Mm-hmm. And then I guess they're saying they're not running for re-election because Trump has created such a culture of political retribution and vengeance. He's so focused on an enemies list. And you see Martin Taylor Greene got chased out of here. So again, at the end of the day, more of them are concerned with keeping their jobs than doing it. But it does seem that some of them are moving as people of conscience and doing what is in the best interest of their constituents.
May there be more. Congresswoman, good to talk to you.
Yeah, Congresswoman, thank you very much. I'm sorry about the connection, but
Me
thank
too.
you very much for persevering.
We'll see you soon.
Well, I hope to see y'all in person, okay?
I would love that.
Right
I would
here
love
at the
that.
library.
Yep.
Be well.
We have been speaking with U.S. Representative Ayanna Pressley, who, of course, represents parts of Boston and Cambridge as well. Coming up after this quick break, Tufts International Affairs Professor Daniel Drezner on the latest in Iran and more. More than at least 2,000 protesters have been killed so far. We're going to hear about that, and we're going to hear the latest about when we're taking over Greenland, Jim. That's next. I'm Marjorie Egan. He's Jim Browder. You're listening to BPR 89.7 GBH, live from the Boston Public Library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
What will the ousting of Nicolas Maduro from Venezuela mean for the future of the oil industry?
If you're benefiting the U.S. economy, it's probably to the detriment of someone, potentially Venezuela.
I'm Juana Summers. We go to Texas, which has the most refining capacity in the United States, for answers on all things considered from NPR News.
Today at 4, here on GBH News 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you. And the Museum of Science, featuring superpower dogs on the giant screen. The film journeys around the globe as audiences meet the special dogs who save lives and discover the powerful bond they share with their human partners. More at MOS.org. And the Boston Symphony Orchestra. This month, the E Pluribus Unum Festival explores American music, history, and ideals through performances and in-depth conversations at Symphony Hall and around Greater Boston. BSO.org.
Welcome back to BPR. Marjorie Egan, Jim Browder, live at the library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. 1 o'clock, Dr. Atul Gawande, formerly of USAID, which has now been destroyed by the Trump administration, is going to join us in person here to detail the incredible carnage and numbers of deaths because of the United States backing out of this more than half-century commitment to people around the world. Another week, more international affairs issues to wade through, from Iran to Greenland and Denmark. We're joined now on Zoom by Daniel Drezner. He's a distinguished professor of international politics, academic dean at the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy at Tufts University. You can find his great Substack at Daniel Drezner. Dan Drezner, welcome back. Good to see you.
Happy to talk. Real slow week, hasn't it been?
I know.
Like them all.
It's unbelievable. Well, I'm going to play a little sound from President Trump. He was speaking at the Detroit Economic Club yesterday, talking about the deaths of Iranian protesters. Here he is.
And I've canceled all meetings with the Iranian officials until the senseless killing of protesters stops. And all I say to them is help is on its way. You saw that I put tariffs on anybody doing business with Iran. Just went into effect today. And I say, make Iran great again.
So what's happening? What does this mean?
Oh, Lord. Well, I think what Trump is trying to do is cash in on his Venezuela dividend. which is what you can argue happened in Venezuela is whatever you think of the legality of the operation or the long-term wisdom of it, the short-term tactical aspect of it was quite effective. All right, the U.S. military went in, they snatched Maduro, they went out, no American lives were lost, only a few Venezuelan lives were lost. And this has made the rest of the world think he could do anything, which therefore it's not a coincidence that after this operation, suddenly you start hearing conversations about Greenland again. Suddenly you start hearing conversations about, well, we might take action in Iran. The problem is that I don't think Trump has a lot of assets to deploy in Iran. Indeed, because he has sent a couple of aircraft carriers from the Mediterranean to the Caribbean, he doesn't have the same military assets that he even did back in June when he launched some sort of pinprick airstrikes against Iran's nuclear facilities. But I believe what he's hoping is because there's been a past precedent of him using these kinds of military actions, that he can cow or deter the Iranians from taking more aggressive action against their own people. Unfortunately, over the last 48 hours, we've gotten reports that upwards between 2,500 and 12,000 Iranians have died due to this sort of crackdown. The other thing I would note is that Trump was very careful to say that if there's more death or if there are Iranian attacks on U.S. military assets in the region, he said help is on the way, and that's a little ambiguous. I can only imagine he might mean covert help or potentially assistance from the Israelis. He's trying to take advantage of the fact that people think he's unpredictable to make the Iranians think twice about engaging in a brutal crackdown. And for once, I hope he's right about that. I'm skeptical that he actually is.
You know, one of the things that made me particularly nervous this morning is there's a New York Times story, which I'm sure you've seen, saying that the U.S. is moving some personnel away from an air base in Qatar in anticipation of fill in the blank in Iran. Could that possibly just be a tactic to instill concern on the part of Iranian leaders, or does that mean more in your estimation, Dan?
It could be a tactic or it could mean more. He's done this in the past. Think about during Trump's first term when he was threatening to take action against North Korea. He evacuated all non-essential personnel from South Korea. Furthermore, when the U.S. launched strikes against Iran back in June, Iran retaliated by launching missiles to Qatar. It was pretty symbolic, but nonetheless, he did so. You could argue that this, if he's bluffing or if he's not, he'd do this no matter what, because he can send the signal that I might very well be serious.
You know, one of the things I went out of my way searching for last night with some success were foreign policy experts who generally are critical of everything that Trump does, who actually said on the plus side, and I think I could summarize what most of them said, on the plus side, his threats to verbal threats to the Iranian leaders and his verbal support of the protesters may have inspired the protesters to greater strength. On the downside, inspiring the protesters to greater strength, if you don't really support them, could mean thousands of more deaths and an end to what some people say could have been a revolution to topple the government. So where do you fall on that spectrum there?
To use a word that international relations scholars like a lot, we need to be realistic about this, which is to point out that this is hardly the first time you've seen uprisings in Iran. We saw this in 2022, 2011, 2009. There were some in between those years that, because I'm not an Iran expert, I've forgotten the dates. But nonetheless, this has been a perpetual problem that Iran has had to deal with, both because it has run its economy into the ground and it is also dealing with Western sanctions. I think what the leadership has done over the last couple days makes their revealed preference very clear, which is they are perfectly willing to slaughter their own population no matter what happens. If Trump, and he can do this, launches sort of symbolic attacks on symbols of the Iran's leadership, whether it is an attempted decapitation strike of Khamenei or maybe against the Iran Revolutionary Guard Corps, I suppose there's a scenario whereby that really does inspire the Iranian population to think, oh, we actually have a great power who's got our back. We can potentially go out into the streets. I think that is a very high-risk gamble, and I'm not sure, frankly, how good U.S. intelligence is on Iran. Part of the reason the Venezuela operation worked as well as it did is that the U.S. had a lot of assets in Venezuela. We know that the CIA had been there for months trying to track Maduro. I think when it comes to Iran, the United States is far more dependent on Israeli intelligence. And don't get me wrong, Israeli intelligence is actually pretty good in Iran, as was seen during the war last year. But I don't know the extent to which a symbolic attack will actually lead to an overthrow of the regime.
That was one of the lines I remember best when they were talking about Venezuela, is that Raising Cane, as Trump likes to call him, his military guy, talked about how they knew where Maduro ate, what he ate, where his pets were, what his pets were doing. I mean, they seem to have every moment of his day sort of down pat. So obviously there was someone in there that was willing to help us big time.
There is another element to consider here, which is I'm not sure if Trump's allies in the region, the Gulf states in particular, want necessarily to see a decapitation strike. They like seeing Iran weakened, which is what the effect of the past couple of years has been. But I don't think they want to see chaos in Iran. And a decapitation strike would increase the odds of that. So the other thing to consider, it's not necessarily that Trump will listen to the Saudis, or the Emiratis, or what have you, or the Qataris for that matter, but that is a factor to consider.
I have one last question about this. Almost every Iranian analyst I've seen on TV or heard on NPR almost seems to be reading from the same playbook. They say these words exactly. There's no country on earth where there is greater distance between the leaders and the people of the country. I thought Afghanistan would win that prize, but that I'm not the expert that you are. Do you buy that notion? And if you do, what does it even mean operationally? What does that mean?
First of all, I think the city of Minneapolis should be in the running. I'm just going to put that out there.
Sadly, you are,
Something to think about. But more importantly, I would say it is undeniably true that the Iranian regime is relatively unpopular. There's a reason why you've had continual mass popular uprisings in Iran. It is very clear that the citizens of Iran are sick and tired of the theocracy that continues to oppress the people and deny them basic human rights. That is absolutely true. Is Iran the absolute worst on this? I mean, that's one of those questions that I actually think it's a pointless debate. There are plenty of awful governments out there, beyond Iran. And Iran has at least some patina of democratic or, elected institutions that admittedly are not really more of a show than anything else. But I think trying to debate which country is the absolute worst is a fun intellectual exercise, but doesn't really move the needle in terms of what we should do.
Okay, I apologize.
We're talking to Daniel Drezner, professor of international politics and academic dean at the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy at Tufts University. So, Professor, we have not yet invaded Greenland, as far as I know, but that's seems to be...
Everyone check their social media feeds right now.
Exactly right.
Yeah. So give your analysis there.
My analysis is that I blame the Mercator projection. So the Mercator projection is the way we normally see maps, that take a three-dimensional globe and make it two-dimensional. And if anyone has seen a map of North America or of just generally the world on a flat two-dimensional space, Greenland looks massive. Yeah. It looks as big as all of North America. And Donald Trump has said in multiple interviews, he really likes maps. I think partly what is going, functionally, the question of whether or not the U.S. needs to own Greenland, the answer is very obvious. The answer is no, because the U.S. could pretty much do whatever it wants in Greenland already. Denmark is a loyal treaty ally. The U.S. already has a base in Greenland. There are already operations that it can conduct in terms of, fending off either Russian or Chinese interference. If it wants to mine anywhere in Greenland, it probably can. There's been a whole, host of stories showing that legally and politically, the administration or the United States can already get what it wants in Greenland. I think the tell is that Trump admitted at some point that what he said was psychologically it would be good to have Greenland. On Greenland. And psychologically, that's very clear. He's not talking about the United States. He's talking about himself. Because actually the polling on this is overwhelmingly opposed to the U.S. annexation of Greenland. It's been very clear cut on this. But what I think Trump is thinking about is what his legacy looks like. The fact is the U.S. hasn't acquired territory in quite some time. And if somehow the U.S. were to actually succeed in acquiring Greenland, whether by force or by annexation or what have you, he would go down in the history books as someone who acquired a landmass greater than Germany, France, and the United Kingdom combined.
I totally subscribe to that. We had Rufus Gifford on yesterday, the day before, whenever it was, former U.S. ambassador to Denmark, and he was talking about what a U.S. takeover of Greenland would mean for NATO, because obviously Denmark is part of NATO. Here's a little bit of what Ambassador Gifford had to tell us.
What the White House is talking much more about now, which is kind of this idea of Western Hemisphere domination. So I think that should scare every American. This idea that it's good for American national security, the reason why I think that's more bogus than any other argument is simply because of the fact that if you destroy NATO, the most important alliance that the modern world has ever seen, in my mind, all you do is empower Russia and China.
A lot of experts, not just Ambassador Gifford, have said if this were to be a military action, which at least in word, Trump and his people seem to say is possible, it would mean the end of NATO. Do you subscribe to that notion?
I do, although I'm going to point out that there's been a lot of provocations against Europe over Trump's first term, not to mention the first year of his second term, and whether or not that would actually lead to the dissolution of NATO. They've tolerated a lot, and I think that's one of the problems is that the Trump administration, frankly, doesn't respect Europe all that much, and that's why they think they can do this. Now, that said, where I completely agree is that if it does lead to the dissolution of NATO, you have destroyed the most important exception to international politics in history, which is, a lot of international relations scholars are realists. And clearly the administration is also sort of brutally Hobbesian in the belief that, it's a war of all against all. We have to do whatever we can. International cooperation is highly overrated. And the biggest exception to that, the most, the exemplar that points out this exception is NATO. NATO has been a multilateral alliance that has been in existence for more than 80 years, 80 years, I think, and it works. That's the amazing thing. I've had, conversations with Russian officials where we, post-Ukraine, where we talk about, well, how do we know you're not necessarily going to move into the Baltic states? And their answer is because that would be a NATO. That would be a move against NATO. Right. And they recognize that is a different, order of magnitude. And so NATO has been effective as a deterrent. And if you get rid of that, maybe the United States in the short term doesn't have to worry about its European allies. In the long term, it is creating a recipe for chaos across the Eurasian landmass.
Could you do it? I assume 99% of our audience knows what Article 5 is. Could you explain what it is for the 1% who might not?
I apologize. Article 5 in NATO implies that an attack against one is an attack against all members of NATO. It basically implies that other members of NATO do need to come to the assistance of the country under attack. Obviously, Article 5, I should point out, the only time Article 5 has actually been invoked in all of NATO's history was after the 9/11 attacks for the United States. In other words, the one country that has ever actually needed NATO's Article 5 is the United States.
Wow.
Unaware.
Wow, and that, of course, is why Ukraine has wanted for years to.
And why Russia doesn't want.
Yes, this is why the Ukraine has desperately wanted Article 5 commitments. Wants to join NATO. This is why Ukraine is understandably suspicious when the United States promises, well, we'll almost provide that, but not exactly. And this is why Russia has opposed NATO expansion.
There's so much that goes on in this flood the zone way the Trump administration operates that we forget things. Like, I don't know if we're ever going to see the pictures of the two men that were supposedly clinging to one of those alleged drug boats. I'm more and more suspicious now than ever if they were even drug boats. But anyway, drug boats coming out of Venezuela that Pete Hegseth has refused to show us. But now we hear, does anybody care at all about the idea that he hit one of those boats with a civilian plane, and that's supposed to be against the rules? You're supposed to be a well-marked military plane, or is that just, a little speck on the screen of craziness?
As a news story, unfortunately, you're right. It probably, I'm just going to remind everyone that I believe Sunday night was when the chairman of the Federal Reserve, put out an extraordinary video pointing out that the Trump administration was, threatening to investigate and prosecute him. I'm just reminding everyone of that because it's been 72 hours and, a lot has happened since then. as a news story, what you're talking about will likely fade from view, unfortunately, unless there's follow-on reporting. As a legal question, however, that's where things get interesting, because the Trump administration has claimed that the attacks on those boats were justified because they were prosecuting a war. But if that's the case,
great point,
then the U.S. law on this makes it very clear you cannot engage, and I believe the term is perfidy, in conducting a war. You can't, use disguised aircraft. And so there might be a situation in which, while no one believes the legality of what the Trump administration originally claimed, if you accept that prima facie, then they've violated the law. And the question now is not just what it means for international law, what does it mean for domestic U.S. law, and will there be repercussions? Unfortunately, my very cynical interpretation of what will happen is that in his last day in office, Trump will just issue a blanket pardon of everyone involved in the operation as a way of avoiding any kind of culpability or responsibility.
Assuming there is a last day in office. I have one last question for you, Dan Drezner, before you leave. Did you get a bonus from Tufts when Trump was elected? So I'm thinking you probably have more stuff on the table now than you've had in 3 presidencies. Is that a fair statement?
I learned a long time ago that being an international relations professor is a counter-cyclical profession. And my business is booming right now.
Sorry to hear it. Dan Drezner, we appreciate your time as always. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much for joining us.
Take care.
We've been speaking with Daniel Drezner, Distinguished Professor of International Politics and Academic Dean at the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy at the great Tufts University. He's got a great Substack as well. It's danieldrezner.substack.com, and Drezner is Drezner, DanielDrezner.substack.com. Coming up after this quick break, food policy analyst Corby Kummer is going to tell us about this Fenway food hall that's shut down, which is kind of too bad. And also, Jim, the heist of $400,000 worth of lobsters. I'm Marjorie Egan. He's Jim Browder. You're listening to BPR 89.7 GBH live from the Boston Public Library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
I'm Jared Bowen. Coming up on The Culture Show, now that the Michelin Guide has put Boston on the map, star chef Karen Akunowitz is shining even brighter. Her South Boston restaurants both earned Bib Gourmand honors, putting her bold, inventive Italian approach on a much bigger stage. Akunowitz joins us to talk about the ripple effects of recognition, how kitchens keep their stride when the spotlight widens, and what this moment means for Boston. That and more on The Culture Show today at 2 on GBH 89.7.
Support for our programs comes from you.
And Boston Ski and Tennis, helping families stay active and outdoors this winter, offering a range of winter sport products and services, with locations in Newton and Westboro, or online at bostonskiandtennis.com.
And Pine Island Camp, committed to fostering independence and a strong sense of community. This Rustic Boy summer camp located in Central Maine is simple, unplugged, and rooted in nature. Learn more at pineisland.org.
Welcome back to BPR. Jim Browder and Marjorie Egan, live at the library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. In about 20 minutes, Dr. Atul Gawande, one of the former leaders of USAID before its destruction by Trump and his Secretary of State, will join us to lay out in excruciating, painful detail what the defunding of USAID has meant to hundreds of thousands, to millions of people around the world. Joined on Zoom by Corby Kummer, Executive Director of the Food and Society Policy Program at the Aspen Institute, Senior Editor at The Atlantic, Senior Lecturer at Tufts Friedman School of Nutrition, Science, and Policy. Hey, Corby.
Hi, Corby.
You are only having my friends on. Atul is somebody we revere and see all the time.
Oh, really? Well, he's done an incredible film that was.
You seen the film?
Nominated for Academy Award.
No, I've only heard about it. That's great that it's out.
It's on the New Yorker website. It is unbelievably painful.
It's really upsetting.
Yeah.
Anyway, on a minor upsetting note, because this is a minor thing, but a lot of people like that timeout place down in the Fenway, which is just closed down. So about to close down. Yeah. What happened?
You know, it has to be that there wasn't enough foot traffic. So Time Out is a global franchise of guides to restaurants, and they pioneered a concept that was hugely successful Portugal's top tourist attraction, apparently. They came in 2019 to the huge Sears Landmark Center at Fenway and got a lot of local restaurants and food businesses to come in. You know, it's a huge footprint, that building. And they were doing okay, and they paved the way for a lot of other urban food markets. But the foot traffic wasn't sufficient. Some of their main tenants left. But it's really bad news when real estate that's allowing a variety of locally owned businesses to sell food and thrive is closing. So I'm very sorry to read this.
Well, you know, there was a huge Bed Bath & Beyond there. That shut down. And then there was but since then they put in that ice skating rink in the wintertime, and they had that beer garden. I forget what it's called there. And they got the movie theaters around the corner. But one of the big things about that place was such a pain in the neck to park.
Impossible.
And they charged you an awful lot of money for running into a store for 15 minutes. So that was one of the reasons I stopped going there, was because I was so hostile about the parking.
There was a little corner of the lot that we would always look for parking because we were hoping people wouldn't remember that. Instead of going underground, you turned right.
Yes.
We would always halt that for spots because you wouldn't have to go upstairs and try to remember where you parked. Yes, a big problem. It's an isolated island, so unless you're coming from the Green Line and then going over the bridge, it's not so easy to get to by foot. So there was foot traffic, and then there was also the pandemic. It opened right before the pandemic, so that got off on a bad foot.
So we're turning to Corby Kummer. The only thing more tragic than Time Out, at least domestically on the food front, than Time Out shutting down is $400,000 of lobsters being stolen, which, by the way, is only 3 lobsters, but another. Thank you very much, Margaret. I'm glad you're paying attention. So how do you steal, like, the easy question is, how do you steal $400,000 worth of lobsters? The much more difficult question to me is, how do you unload $400,000 worth of stolen lobsters, Corby Kummer? This happened right here in Taunton or something, or wherever the hell.
They don't have, it was in Taunton. It was fascinating how you steal it. You get one of these operating licenses for interstate shippers. I think they're called MC licenses. You present it to Taunton and you say, okay, I'm your next step. Look, here's my license. I've got all my paperwork. And you don't have to knock them over the head with a lead pipe as he said. So you say you've got these falsified credentials that you've bought from a trucker who wants to get out of business. So it's easy to get these MC licenses. Apparently it thrived during the pandemic when people started saying, oh, I could just steal from home. All I do is print out this license. And then because the goods aren't tagged with any kind of barcode or serial number, you just go to locally owned businesses and open up a bag of lobster and say, hey, you want these at a good price?
It's incredible.
There's no way of tracing it.
And it's really easy to get those documents apparently online, right? It's not a big deal. Imagine that, $400,000.
What do you do about that? I know you're not like a criminal investigator. What do you do to stop the first half of this?
I don't see there, unless they change the resale for these MC permit systems so that you can't do it, or there's an easy way for the truckers who have their own lives and difficulties to understand this is a fraudulent purchaser, I shouldn't turn it over. I don't see there's a way. That's the place where there has to be some fencing. Stolen goods is always going to thrive if somebody can get a low price and there's nothing identifying the lobster. Because as one of the investigators they talked to in the story said, how are you going to prove that's your lobster that was stolen? It's not marked in any way. So it's got to be the permit process.
Would you believe that I'm standing across from a woman who I believe I can accurately say has never had a lobster in her whole life? Is
That's
that true?
not true. I have had a lobster.
How many?
I've eaten some claws.
How many? Like 3?
You know, if everybody's having lobster, I might have a claw. I just don't like it.
Why?
I don't know. It's too rubbery or something.
No,
I don't
it's
know.
not.
I don't know why I don't like lobster.
Okay.
But anyway.
You know what's really good? Stolen lobster.
Stolen lobster
even
tastes
better,
even better. You just got a certain je ne sais quoi about it, Jim.
Exactly.
So, Civil Eats and other people think that the new food pyramid is a climate disaster. And before you tell me why it's such a climate disaster, this description of meat is one of the reasons why a lot of people go to Whole Foods, because they can't think about eating something. Listen to this. Most of the meat consumed in the United States comes from conventional industrial farms where the meat accumulates toxins from pesticide-intensive feed and antibiotics. So, that's a pleasant thought, isn't it? If you go and buy a bunch of hamburger at the regular supermarket, it's full of toxins and antibiotics and hormones and all this horrible stuff. But anyway, all that is now, is this RFK Jr.? Can we blame him for this on top of the food pyramid along with dairy, beef and dairy?
Well, we can blame RFK for saying, I'm cleaning out all of the industry conflicts of interest that he incorrectly said the Dietary Guidelines Committee, which released in, I think, December of 2024, a lot of recommendations prioritizing plant protein over animal protein. We're throwing them out because they all were ridden with industry conflicts of interest, whereas the panel he assembled, many media outlets have established, was full of dairy and beef industry representatives and people with ties to them. They've always been enormously powerful in the dietary guidelines. This is not the first time they've triumphed. They've kept out recommendations for plant proteins from numerous previous sets of dietary guidelines. But the new dietary guidelines are protein mad, as in twice the amount of daily protein that Americans need, proven by various studies. Because, there are a bunch of bros who weight lift and eat a lot of meat to put on muscle, and that's absolutely fine for them. Great. That's good without shirts. That's just terrific. But changing it for Americans to say, you too should be eating a lot of beef, that's like going way too far.
One of the incredible things, and whenever I read something like this, harkens back to the incredible comment that Trump made during the more than 1 million deaths in the United States, when he said something like, one of the reasons we have so many cases of COVID is we do so much testing. If we just did less testing, then we wouldn't have to deal with so many horror shows. The huge agribusinesses, correct me if I'm wrong, Corby Kummer, are lobbying for the way that this is calculated, the climate impact, is an entity would be considered climate neutral if it was spewing out exactly as much methane as it was last year, even if the amount last year was unsustainable, which for a huge farm would be fine. For a little tiny farm that went from, let's say, 10 cows to 20 cows, they would not be climate neutral. They would have doubled their output. I was going to ask a stupid question, is this going to become the law of the land? Of course it is, right?
It's ridiculous doublespeak. And I'm really glad that you pointed out, it's kind of like the government saying we're level funding things that were completely inadequately funded in the first place. So it's a huge triumph because they haven't cut it completely out of the budget. But for this, there's a huge impact to saying eat more beef. Beef is the single most destructive thing you can eat as a consumer. Other forms of meat and animal protein, if you like them, great. Go to pork, go to chicken, go to other animal sources of protein if that's what you really want, sustainably raised and harvested fish, for example. But beef, because it's got like 80 times, methane emissions are 80 times worse and more destructive to the environment than carbon, which is what we always hear about. So beef is just terrible for land, for pesticides, for human health. It's just not good. It's not like it should be eliminated. There's grass-fed beef, which is also still destructive. But this idea that you can call it neutral because it's not any worse than it was when it was really terrible and destructive is, I would say, a new level of Orwellian doublespeak. But
I want to tell you one thing. Corby, as a regular on our show for years, you know that our primary mission is to connect people. And I would like to announce that Atul Gawande has asked us to say hello to you, Corby. So you want to say anything back to Dr. Gawande? Yeah. It's your one opportunity. He's here. What do you want to say?
That I admire everything he does. I can't wait to see the film that he's worked incredibly hard on.
It's brilliant.
Will bring new attention to an urgently important matter.
Is that acceptable response, Doctor? He's happy. So, Corby
Okay.
Kummer, go ahead, Marjorie.
No, well, Pete Wells, I think he was a friend of yours, longtime New York Times.
I would argue he's not a friend of his anymore.
Writer for the food section there. Wrote this long piece about how to eat healthier. And then on the last page of this piece, you kind of savage him.
You do
Corby Kummer.
savage him.
So tell us what he wrote and how you just totally dissed him at the end.
No, I didn't diss him at all. I was praising him for changing the ingredients that he bought in this, grimy, depressing food co-op he went to when he realized this is all the stuff I'm supposed to be eating, like fresh fruits and vegetables and grains that look enticing and exciting, lentils of many different colors. And what I was saying is changing the food environment is the single most important change you can make. That's a fancy way of saying don't keep cookies and candies and things you can't resist in the pantry, because if they're there, you will eat them. So all you have to do is go shopping and fill your shelves with things that you can binge on, you can sleepwalk and eat, and you won't wake up wondering, hating yourself in the morning. So all you do is change what you buy. That's what he did. What he also gave me a chance to do was get on a soapbox and say, this is all very well for you, Pete Wells, who works for the New York Times, or us who can go out and buy the fresh fruits and vegetables we feel like stocking our pantry with, as opposed to making it more accessible to people who know very well they need it, but can't afford it and don't have time to prepare fresh fruits and vegetables.
Did he defend himself there, Jim?
I don't think so. But in any case, as simple as the notion is that he wrote about and that you're embracing, it really is important. As somebody who's had, worried about how healthy I was or how much I weighed almost my whole life, this whole thing about how you surround yourself is so obvious but important. And I think it's hugely good that he wrote about this. By the way, didn't he quit last year? Didn't he quit as the restaurant, or is he no longer the restaurant critic? Now he's a food journalist. What the
That's
hell is
right.
he doing?
He left because it was ruining his health.
He told it.
What he was scaredest of was living with diabetes. He thought, I just don't need this complication in my life. His doctor told him he was well on his way to developing diabetes. So what last week's first installment of his 4 January installments about eating better showed was that he lost 55 pounds and he never counted calories. He did things like he changed what he shopped and he listened to my advice. That's what made all the difference in his health, and really is going to make all the difference for all of the readers of the New York Times. Apparently even you, Jim.
Even me. We're talking to Corby Kummer.
So tell us about, I didn't know there was this crisis with oysters. I'm not a big fan of oysters, but I know when you go to, people love them, you love them, and you go to
You're not a big fan. You've never eaten one oyster in your whole life.
No, not my thing.
That's called worse than not a big fan.
Okay, but you go to oysters, like that place. What's the place down in the Leather District, 24, something, that restaurant?
Row 34.
34, I was close.
Close
not
enough.
24, 34.
It's only off by 10.
And they'll have oysters from different parts of Cape Cod, right? It will say, Wellfleet oysters or Truro oysters, something like that.
Shocking. It's amazing.
But I guess they desperately need restoration. What is happening?
Because we've killed all the farms.
Yeah.
So Mark Kurlansky wrote a book about salt, wrote a book about oysters, and how they really helped propel the whole economy of New England. They used to be so common in New York bars as well as Boston bars that the floors would be covered with oyster shells. They were offered free so that you would come in and spend money on alcohol. They were incredibly common, but they were mostly fished out, and they're very good. They're filter feeders, so what they do is they filter out toxins in water, and they help clean and purify water. So it's really good to have them. We all love Tamar Haspel.
Yes.
Right, the Washington Post. She and her husband operated in Duxbury. And
I didn't know that.
Island Creek is also in Duxbury. There's lots of oyster farms all up and down the coast between Massachusetts and Maine. But now there's a new effort to restore the native oyster beds. It's going to be a couple of years before they will be harvestable and saleable, but they're 130 pounds or something of oyster shells that can create the environment in which oysters can breed. And then come the early spring, the environmental group is going to put in spawning oysters, 130 cubic yards of surf clam shells. And they're going to add spawning age oysters in the spring. So it's to bring back these natural beds, and then eventually they'll allow them to be harvested and sold. It's great.
But
even though I'm sorry.
I was just going to ask, though, is this climate? Is it water warming? Is this pollution? What's the problem?
Oh, I think it was climate warming, and I think it was commercial fisheries just fish out all the natural beds.
Okay.
And so that's why businesses came in. And if you've ever been out, they're sort of enchanting places. They're all on ropes. You go out and they're barely submerged in the water. They're very appealing places.
Have an oyster someday, Marjorie.
I'm working on it, Jim.
I doubt that.
Yeah, I'm working
Hey,
on
Corby, it's great to see you as always. Be well. Take care, Corby Kummer.
Thank you very much, Corby Kummer. We have been speaking with Corby Kummer, Executive Director of the Food and Society Policy Program at the Aspen Institute, a senior editor at The Atlantic, and a senior lecturer at Tufts Friedman School of Nutrition Science and Policy. Corby, thank you. Coming up after the 1 o'clock news, Dr. Atul Gawande is the former Assistant Administrator for Global Health at USAID, which is basically gone now. He's going to join us in person right after the news to talk about the devastating impacts of Trump's custody agency that he has seen himself, the deaths of children, starvation. He's visited the scene of these terrible tragedies, and he's going to tell us about that up next. I'm Marjorie Egan. He's Jim Browder. You're listening to BPR 89.7 GBH, broadcasting from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
For that next birthday, holiday, or special occasion, you can give a standout gift. A GBH membership. Thousands of hours of your favorite PBS shows, event deals, and local business discounts. Learn more at gbh.org/gift membership.
Support for GBH comes from you.
And Mass Humanities, presenting Voices and Votes, Democracy in America, a Smithsonian exhibition in East Sandwich now through January 30th, in collaboration with Massachusetts 250. masshumanities.org. And Explo, from culinary arts to veterinary science, Explo's summer program helps middle schoolers to find their spark. Day and overnight options at explo.org/summer. Priority deadline February 13th.
You're listening to 89.7 WGBH HD1 Boston. Online at gbhnews.org. GBH News. What matters to you?
I'm Jim Browder. You had an hour 3 of BPR live from the Boston Public Library. Celebrated international healthcare leader Dr. Atul Gawande is also the former Assistant Administrator for Global Health at USAID. He'll join us in person to discuss how the shutdown of the organization has had ripple effects around the world, including contributing to the deaths of over 500,000 people worldwide already, most of them children. It's the topic of his Oscar shortlisted documentary, Ravina's Choice.
I'm Marjorie Egan. Those deaths are the consequence that experts warned would happen when Doge axed or chainsawed the aid group. We'll end the show with you getting your reactions to these numbers and how does this square with the U.S. role on the world stage. This is all being done in our names, on our behalf, by our government. What can we do about it? Call or text. That's next in the third hour of BPR 89.7 GBH, live from the Boston Public Library.
Live from NPR News, I'm Lakshmi Singh. The FBI searched a Washington Post journalist's home this morning. It was court-authorized. NPR's Ryan Lucas reports the search was part of a government investigation into whether classified information was leaked.
The FBI searched the home of Washington Post journalist Hannah Natanson, who has been one of the newspaper's lead reporters on the Trump administration's efforts to reshape the federal workforce. Identify Natanson by name, but said the FBI executed the search warrant at the home of a Washington Post reporter who was receiving classified information from a Pentagon contractor. The FBI search sparked immediate concern among First Amendment advocates. The president of the Reporters Committee for Freedom of the Press, Bruce Brown, called the search, quote, a tremendous escalation in the administration's intrusions into the independence of the press. Ryan Lucas, NPR News, Washington.
The State Department says it is putting a hold on visa applications linked to 75 countries where the administration says citizens are likely to depend on public assistance while living in the U.S. It is still unclear which countries are targeted. The suspension is expected to begin in a week. A U.S. official not authorized to speak publicly confirms with NPR that some American military personnel are leaving the Al Udeid air base in Qatar. Also, the Qatari government said in a social media statement, evacuations of some personnel, quote, are being undertaken in response to the current regional tensions, end quote. The special envoy to the Middle East, Steve Witkoff, says the U.S. brokered ceasefire plan for Gaza is moving into the next phase, demilitarizing Gaza, establishing a technocratic government, and rebuilding. His post on X today says Hamas must immediately return the final deceased hostage and fully comply with the agreement. Hamas accuses Israel of repeatedly violating the ceasefire. The president of Poland says President Trump is the only global leader capable of standing up to Russian President Vladimir Putin, the comment coming during a trip to the UK. Here's NPR's Lauren Freyer.
Polish President Karol Nawrocki told the BBC he thinks Trump is the only leader capable of stopping the Russian president and his ongoing war in Ukraine.
It means that we have to do everything to support Donald Trump to solve this problem. This is the most important thing. And, I trust myself.
Nawrocki says the U.S. president has, quote, unique authority and leverage to bring Moscow to the negotiating table. The Polish president is a far-right historian, amateur boxer, and longtime supporter of Trump. He says he sees Europe detaching itself from Washington and disapproves, adding that he believes the U.S. is still the guarantor of Europe's security. Lauren Freyer, NPR News, London.
The Dow is down 257 points. It's NPR News.
Good afternoon. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro. Connecticut officials say their state is likely to fall short of goals to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Officials hope to reduce those emissions by 45% of Connecticut's 2001 levels by the year 2030. But Katie Dykes, head of the Department of Energy and Environmental Protection, says that's unlikely.
Can we meet those targets, especially in the light of these federal changes? And the answer is that it's going to be tough.
State data shows Connecticut is likely to fall short of its 2030 goal by 11%. Dykes partly blames efforts by the Trump administration to make renewable energy more expensive, including the elimination of tax credits for clean energy projects. The Trump administration has also tried to stop an offshore wind project expected to power some 350,000 homes in Connecticut and in Rhode Island. Massachusetts Cannabis Control Commission holding a public meeting today. As noted on their webpage, the agenda includes discussion and a possible vote on regulatory amendments related to exclusive delivery of cannabis, the secret shopper program, and social consumption exclusivity. In sports, it's all about the Fleet tonight. The national women's hockey team hosts Toronto. In the forecast, cloudy, low 50s today, cloudy and 40s overnight, cloudy and upper 50s tomorrow. We could see some sunshine on Friday, but temperatures will start to plummet. Weather prognosticators telling us next week we're going back to the 20s and the teens. 51 degrees in Boston. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Capital One, offering their premium travel card, Venture X. What's in your wallet? Terms apply. Details at CapitalOne.com. And listeners like you who donate to this NPR station.
Welcome to hour number 3 of Boston Public Radio. Jim Brady and Marjorie Egan. We are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Hello again, Jim.
Doctor, join you in applause, so it wasn't embarrassing for you alone.
Yeah,
there.
well, I like to.
That was great.
I like to do what we can to increase the volume. You know what I mean?
We're joined now at the library by Dr. Atul Gawande, surgeon, author, former assistant administrator for global health at USAID. He stepped down on January 19th, the day before Trump's second inauguration, and the beginning of the end of this incredibly important organization. In a piece that Dr. Gawande wrote in November in The New Yorker, he quotes an epidemiologist, Brooke Nichols from Boston University, and what he says is, based on her research, as of November 5th of last year, it estimated that USAID's dismantling has already caused the deaths of 600,000 people, 2/3 of whom are children. These impacts are the topic of Gawande's Oscar-shortlisted, incredibly powerful documentary Rovina's Choice. In the film, doctors there in Kenya say the cuts were unimaginable.
There was a lot of incredulity, like this can't be happening. This actually cannot be happening. It seemed unimaginable that the cuts would be as bad as they were and affect the sectors where life-saving activities were ongoing.
Dr. Gawande is a contributor to The New Yorker, author of best-selling books Complications, Better, The Checklist Manifesto, and Being Mortal, Medicine and What Matters in the End. He's the Fish Chair in Surgery at Brigham and Women's and a professor at Harvard Medical School and a co-founder of Ariande Labs. Doctor, it's great to see you. Thanks so much for being here.
So great to be here.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much for being here. So before we get to the film Rovina's Choice, explain to people what USAID used to be before it was gutted.
So the thing to understand, John F. Kennedy created USAID. He campaigned for it, got Congress to back it and fund it in 1961. And he had seen how the Marshall Plan represented a different way that the U.S. approached the world. When we won in World War II, we did not plunder the countries we defeated. For one of the first times ever, we invested in those countries. Germany, Italy, Japan, and the result was an extraordinary growth economically, survival improvements, and it benefited all of us. We made the world more prosperous, it made the US more prosperous, and it created peace for decades. The creation of USAID was about bringing that to the rest of the world, bringing that to Latin America at that time, and it helped bring Latin America from mostly impoverished to being mostly middle to upper income today. It helped turn Asia famines around. My parents came from India, where USAID support not only helped get them through famine and malnutrition, but then invested in agriculture that my father's own farms could, where he grew up, could benefit from. So India is now one of the world's great food exporters, right? And a partner to us around the world. So USAID, when I arrived, it was like, it's the best job in medicine I've ever had. I had 2,500 people in 65 plus countries. We deployed it amounted to, about half the budget of the Mass General Brigham.
Wow.
Reaching hundreds of millions of people. And just in Live Save alone, USAID in the last 20 years saved, according to independent analysis, 90 million lives, cut child deaths by 1/3, and then was turned off.
So almost overnight.
It was literally overnight. There, I can say, like, Trump, hours after inauguration, signed an executive order instructing Marco Rubio to shut down the aid. On Friday, he issued orders that immediately halted, and by Monday, it was clear hundreds of thousands of people would be harmed, lives would be lost, and they turned a temporary pause into a complete shutdown.
When you resigned at the end of President Biden's term, just hours before, I think minutes before Trump took over, what was your expectation of what would happen to USAID? And I asked that, well, for obvious reasons, but I think it's accurate to say that if you had to pick a Republican in Congress who was the greatest supporter of USAID, you'd have to put Marco Rubio in that category.
He is.
So he was.
He was.
So what was your expectation about what would happen with Trump?
I did not remotely see this coming. There was, in the first term, Trump, after initially arriving and proposing some budget cuts of 20 or 30%, which would have been massive just in and of itself, turned around and recognized that it was an important tool of his own foreign policy. He was the one who backed that we would eliminate HIV, not only in the US, but abroad by 2030, and supported vaccination programs and everything else. The areas of disagreement fell into, contraception, abortion-related items, and you knew there would be DEI battles. But 95% of what USA did was supported by Democrats and Republicans, And then it was it was a complete turnaround.
I quoted from your piece in the New Yorker in November, where you used the data that was collected by Brooke Nichols, a BU epidemiologist and mathematical modeler, to say that there had already, this is at November 5th, 600,000 deaths, 2/3 kids. And as somebody who used to do politics, numbers like that are so mind-numbing that often people can't relate to them. You make this so painfully relatable in Ravina's Choice, this 22-minute film that, by the way, is Oscar consideration, as it should be. Tell us about her, tell us about her baby Jane, tell us about the story, Doctor.
Yeah, and I don't want to give away the ending, but Ravina is a mother who, with her daughter Jane, she's a refugee from South Sudan. They were facing food cuts that completely cut off access to U.S. funds, which meant that the calories available per day in the refugee camp was only 40% of the daily needs of the children in the family. The child became sick, and I was doing reporting. I asked a documentary team to join me, and I was interested in what happened around malnutrition because it was one of our great success stories in ways most people don't know. 20 years ago, the mortality rate for a child with severe acute malnutrition who arrived at a health facility was 20 to 30%. We changed the way we do that work. We bring community health workers to, with a measuring tape and a scale, measure out what is the condition of the children in their neighborhoods. And if you saw someone who was losing weight against their height, you immediately fed them a food developed here in the U.S., it's called RUTF, ready-to-use therapeutic foods, specially formulated to be all the caloric and protein and nutritional needs that a child has in a day. And they could turn it around without ever having to come to the hospital. 85% of the kids never needed to be in a medical facility, and those who did, then there were specific protocols that were created. That dropped the mortality rate to under 1%, including in the community, in that refugee camp where she'd worked. I had been part of trying to make that place getting to those better results. And so Ravina, is navigating a system in the weeks after the shutdown. Malnutrition takes a long time to cause harm, but 2 months without enough calories had made Jane extraordinarily sick. And now she arrives into a broken system, and you're with her, and she has choices to make, like any mother would, because she has children at home who are starving and aren't getting food, and she hears word that they're not being fed and now are getting sick themselves, while she's needing to be with baby Jane in this overcrowded, unfunded, defunded hospital setting.
After having walked 6 miles in the scorching sun to get to the hospital on the South Sudanese border. When you mentioned the stunning decline in death from malnutrition, how much of that decline is attributable to funding and work from USAID?
A huge amount. First of all, because the research to figure out that protocols, a lot of it came from places like from USAID. USAID is 40% of the funding of the World Food Program. So USAID has brought other countries on board with what we're doing, but we were the leading country in the world for this revolution in malnutrition. And then our farmers, these were specially formulated foods, specially formulated formulas for neonates as well. That came from American farmers who were cut off. There's a Rhode Island factory for this that got shut down. There's a similar one in Georgia. We have also taught for countries how to start creating and have the accurate way of creating this themselves. So we are a central part of it. And because we lead on this work, what happened when we pulled out is that instead of other countries stepping in, those countries, Germany, the UK, Netherlands, EU as a whole, Japan, they are having to now spend more on military and security they pulled out as well. And so it's been enormously devastating. As you heard, actually tomorrow in the BU tracker, it's called Impact Counter, you can look at it, Google it online, the numbers now cross 750,000 dead as of tomorrow.
We're talking with Atul Gawande. He's a contributor to The New Yorker, and he used to run the medical end of USAID, and he's at the Brigham, Fish Chair in Surgery at the Brigham and Women's Hospital, and of course he's at Harvard Medical School too. You know, the thing that was so moving about your film, Ravina's Choice, is, you know, you saw this baby, Jane, and Ravina talking about how the child, and I don't know how old the child was, like about a year and a half, maybe two.
About a year old, yeah.
Okay, about a year old, that her little body was swelling and that her skin was falling into the water, and that's when she panicked and decided to bring the child to the clinic, and that because she had wounds on her skin, her mother's calling back and forth, trying to carry her on her back, and how painful it was to the child. And you get to the clinic and you see all these other children that are starving. I mean, it just makes, I mean, I felt so ashamed, frankly, that we would do this. But it's right now, it's almost, I mean, I was wondering, you mentioned the other countries pulling out, but where are these other people like the Red Cross or like Catholic Relief Services or Doctors Without Borders? I mean, is there no one that can go in there and help?
So number one, almost all of those are places that had been backed by these by the United States.
Okay.
Furthermore, we have defunded the World Health Organization. We have gone on the attack against
This is the Trump administration.
This Trump administration, our country.
Our country.
We have gone on the attack against cooperative agencies out of the United Nations, even UNICEF, and so, you know, they're there still. They are diminished. The World Food Program was zeroed out by the U.S. administration, but they have some funds from others. You have philanthropists that step in. So, for example, one of the reasons the film was an important way to bring this across is for you to see the processes, but also the people. You know, what we imagine is we're parachuting in a bunch of expensive doctors and you know, coming to save the day, and instead what you see is it's Nigerians and Kenyans in this case, that we have trained, that we have built a system with them, that they are running and operating, that you see how incredibly capable these people are.
Well, the physician that you spoke with over and over again, two of them. They were local.
Yes, and these were, and so these people and the talent is there, but the system then breaks down, and that's where you see all of this start to fall apart.
But when you say, when you say the talent is there, the talent there is very limited numbers. 300,000 refugees seeking help in this. How many doctors?
Yeah, so it's 5 doctors.
One for every 60,000 people.
Yes. Not the usual primary care load.
You know, I wonder when...
And Sela, by the way, so her, you know, she got cut off.
She's the medical director of the joint, right?
Yeah.
Of the thing, right?
She's a medical director.
She's great. She's great.
She is now on 2-month and 3-month contracts, because as they get a little bit of money in, so there have been some philanthropists that stepped in to keep her employed, to keep some of the nurses employed, although they've lost, you know, they lost at one point 2/3 of all the community health workers. Now some of the community health workers have got it turned back on for a short period of time. But the future is uncertain. You can't build when you don't even know if you're going to be employed 3 months later. And, you know, I fear losing somebody like her, because they're already undermanned and understaffed, and then you don't have any way to commit to them.
So before we leave this, and by the way, you can't, I know I speak for Marjorie, cannot recommend 22 minutes of your time. More
you can get it online
spent
very easily.
Free on YouTube and on The New Yorker.
Yep.
So I'm so glad you amended what we said a second ago and said, this is us. This is in our name. This is being done. It's not a guy by himself making a decision. What can real people do? You cannot possibly watch the end of this thing and not be heartbroken. I mean, what do real people do?
Well, first, I have a view about how change happens. And the first way it happens is you cannot let the invisible, let the damage be invisible. The administration to this day denies that a single human being has been harmed. And the first thing, the reason why I think it's so important, just even as an act of conscience to watch the film, is to understand that we cannot let these people be invisible. They are trying to erase them. And we have to make sure that are known, the people and what's happening. Second is that visibility translates into our calling on Congress to change what's happening. And the budget bill, we've been asked to do a viewing of the film on the Hill, which will be coming up in a couple of weeks. And
have they said okay?
Yes. Well, it's the Democrats are doing the screening. We don't have everybody together. But the Republicans have now passed out of both the House and Senate a budget bill that restores global health funding. There is a 5% cut, but it's not the 50% cut that is what's been proposed. USAID is not getting resurrected, but the State Department is now, the Republicans and Democrats are potentially putting money back into trying to make these programs go and hold Marco Rubio accountable for restoring some of this work. There's a lot of reasons to have concern about whether it will happen and whether the administration will actually follow what Congress says and execute on it. But it is an indication that this, supposedly easy to hit foreigners who cares, that you are making it, we are all making the damage visible and find it unconscionable.
The key, by the way, if USAID could help a few white South Africans, I think we'd be in a lot better shape, Doctor.
A couple of things, Atul Gawande, you talk about how that there were some criticisms, some of them legitimate, about bureaucracy and all that kind of thing with USAID, but you also talk about, I think the average American taxpayer, correct me if I'm wrong, this was costing us $24 a year?
Yes, the average American taxpayer in 2024 paid about $15,000 per person in taxes in the country. And the USAID Global Health work is $24 per person.
So that's like a large pizza is kind of what we're talking about. I just want to play, because it so enrages me, when the Chief of Staff, Susie Wiles, talked about Marco Rubio and his great principled stand on how he's a guy that's not going to roll over because he's such a principled guy. Here he is in the final scene from Rowena's Choice that shows Marco Rubio defending the end of USAID to Rhode Island Representative Gabe Amo. Here's Rubio.
We're going to continue to do food aid. We're going to do more food aid than any country on the planet times 10.
The issue here is we have children who are dying. So will you commit to continuing to fund the production, transportation, and distribution of life-saving products to save starving children around the world?
No children are dying on my watch.
No children are dying on my watch.
No children are dying on my watch. I mean, it's more like propaganda coming from this administration.
It is. We are showing the faces of those children and those people who've died. Those numbers that I describe are conservative numbers, and the deaths can be hard to see. If you take child deaths from 3%, they dropped from 4% to 3%, you take it back to 4%, that's a 1/3 increase in deaths. And yet you don't just walk around and see people dying in the corner in the same way. It's broken systems that mean people aren't being immunized, people aren't getting malaria care, kids aren't getting food treatment for malnutrition in the appropriate way. And that's where you see these happen. And so that's part of why they need to make it on film.
And it is very obviously painful. This is very painful to these children, this death from malnutrition. It's not a pleasant death. There's any such thing as a pleasant death. This is not it.
So going from horrible news to horrible news, back in the United States, you also wrote a piece in the New Yorker in April. Here's a line: now the Trump administration was seeking to do to the university, that would be Harvard, what it had done to USAID. We've talked about this a lot, but not with the level of expertise and connection you do. What are you describing there, Atul Gawande?
So I returned from working at USAID, seeing it destroyed in my wake, arriving at Harvard to find that we have had our research funding completely frozen and that there was an effort to dismantle our research institution. You know, I returned to Harvard School of Public Health and the medical school, and those cuts were freezing all federally funded research. I'd founded a research center where we had made discoveries and approaches that cut the mortality of surgery in the United States as well as around the world on average over 40%. That approaches that we had done to improve outcomes in childbirth and other areas, and 1/3 of our programs were cut off. Some of those, you know, a court decision came through that those funds could be restored and needed to be, or mandated to be restored. And so the funds got turned back on again, only to now, you know, we've received notices that our programs have been terminated. So one of our efforts, which was reducing in US surgery, taking approaches to reduce deaths in geriatric populations, 2/3 of people are over 65 who end up needing surgery. And that's our next big opportunity. We were in year 2 of a 5-year program to find solutions, and that's been shut down. Our team that discovered to do this work is gone. They're not getting to do any of this work, and we got notified yesterday about another program for rural areas that got shut down. So the ongoing cuts, the loss of training programs, you know, places like Harvard School of Public Health, most of the PhD student slots that we had are no longer offered this year. And we're losing our ability to drive science. And Harvard is not unique in this. This is happening nationwide.
You know, we had somebody you mentioned in your piece, Dr. Sarah Fortune, was with us in May, and she was an infectious disease researcher at Harvard. Her $60 million international research project on tuberculosis, I think which is the largest in the world, it was very large, was halted by NIH on April 15th. Here's what she had to say.
The massive shock was the week before when the Globe had contacted me to say that this program was at the top of the list of contracts under consideration or by the administration in the negotiation with Harvard. That was a shock. To be at the top of the list in terms of contracts under threat, that was a gut punch, because in a way you think you're safe if you're working on global infectious disease of clear importance, that you think that's going to skate under the political radar.
And I think a few months later she got a partial reprieve, but
she did.
I want to clarify something that we did. We had the Attorney General here yesterday, and she was one of the lead attorneys amongst attorneys general who filed this litigation that's been successful, that the grants that were in progress that were delayed or ended, at least they have to reconsider them. The thing that's important, because people get all optimistic how great that is, that's for either existing grants or grants in process. Down the line, future, Donald Trump can decide and his people to fund none of these things, and it's not actionable in the same way that the cutting off was actionable. That is correct, right?
They've indicated that they do not think Harvard should be eligible for any future grants in research at all. You know, will we fight our way through? Yes. And the House and the Senate, the current bill that just came through 2 days ago, if it's passed, includes restoring practically all of the NIH funds for next year. But how it's administered, the loss of certainty, makes it so you can't bank on taking on a PhD student for the next 5 years and knowing that they will be able to do their work and have a laboratory and all of those things. So that's the place we're in. We are burning our seed corn in science, in public health. You pair that with the Medicaid cuts and other things that we're doing, it is indifference to the harm this all causes for humanity.
Well, beyond the harm, beyond the most important thing is the harm for humanity, as you detailed beautifully and horribly in your film. We've talked about this in terms of almost anything that Trump is savage in his 12 months in office. I think people have this notion that Democrats win the midterms and all of a sudden things get much better. All they can really do is stop the worst, and then let's say a progressive Democrat gets elected. What you help and your colleagues help create that's been destroyed doesn't just get rebuilt in January of 2029. I mean, this is a long process, no?
100%. In the space of months, you had 10,000 people fired out of USAID. Those
10,000?
10,000. those people, you lost all of that expertise, but those people were also providing funding to local organizations and people like Dr. Silamanti in Kenya, and research programs in South Africa and HIV, and you go on the list, it's hundreds of thousands of people who then have been sidelined, laid off, and all of those things. So, and then you have what's happening domestically in a similar way. The recovery, you know, it's easy to blow up something. To build it back will take years, but we will work on it, but we've lost huge numbers of lives and our expertise and grounds.
Can you stay a few more minutes, by the way?
Yeah,
I can stay, yeah.
Great.
You know what's really amazing to me that people aren't more upset about this? You think in my own lifetime, you know, years ago you got breast cancer, you were probably going to die very soon. Or you got lung cancer, you were probably going to die very soon. You've seen how people now can live a very long time with that. You talk about your own son, how medical advances, tell us about your son, how medical advances helped him with a pretty dire diagnosis at just 11 days after birth, and now 30 years old or whatever.
Yeah, my son Walker was born with a congenital heart defect that went undetected during the pregnancy. It involved a severe blockage in his aorta and 2 holes in his heart. And if he'd been born 15 years earlier, he would not have survived. But there was a medicine discovered at Children's Hospital that they did the testing under an NIH grant that was a grant to a young researcher who then tested it out and found that it could keep the circulation to a baby with one of these heart defects, keep it going so they could survive those initial few days, can recover well enough to have surgery, and then not only got a repair and a replacement of his aorta and 2 patches in his heart, but he was going to need future procedures, and he would need to be able to have the management, like how do you manage his blood pressure? How do you help a child become among the first geriatric cohort of children with a congenital heart defect? So he's 30 years old now. He's out of college. He's, you know, working on a science fiction novel.
Oh, good for him.
and living a normal, great life. But he has now a cardiac stent, the struts are popping, and the research that's currently funded by the federal government is the database of all of the children with this condition who are now living into their middle-age years. And that data is how you track and learn what do you now do to keep these people going, what are the problems that they get, and how do you manage it well? And those are the kinds of things that we would squander. I mean, it's years of people being followed. And, you know, we've shut down the Framingham Heart Study at one point. We've, you know, these things that we've learned so much from, that's what's at risk.
So, Dr. Atul Gawande, I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, I remember when Joe Biden was diagnosed with prostate cancer, there were a lot of stories that said, had he been diagnosed with the same kind of cancer 5 years ago, he might not have made it either. So you see how these advances come like in these trials that save people's lives. I mean, how many of us know people that are with cancer on medical trials, which are brand new?
Yeah. Yeah. My grandmother died of malaria. My dad became a doctor because he was at her bedside at 10 years old in a little village, and he had I don't know how, never met a doctor in his life, but he was with her in the 6 weeks as she declined and died for lack of getting a medicine that was available in the world. And it made him decide to become a doctor. I was born after he was trained in New York City and met my mom, who's also from India. And they wanted to return after their training, and I was born by then. And I had an adverse reaction to this smallpox vaccine. That meant I couldn't leave. And USAID was the operational ground force behind the eradication of smallpox. And so I got to be in a place where I now led the people who were responsible for programs like that. It was such an American story, isn't it?
It is a great American
Kennedy
story.
Kennedy is committed to bringing smallpox back, Doctor.
RFK Jr.
So can we, since you're kind enough to stay a few more minutes, I know something that concerns you that we talked to Charlie Baker about this when he was governor quite a bit. We've spoken to Dr. Catherine Gerger Barnett recently about it. We spoke to Michael Curry, head of the League of Community Health Centers, the shortage of primary care physicians. Can you fill us in on where we are, how much of a crisis it is, and who's got the fix?
Well, so one thing I want to express is I don't think most people really understand what primary care is and what it's capable of doing. I'm a surgeon, and I came to learn from work in primary care, not my work, that primary care is probably the most valuable investment we make in the healthcare system for longevity. At USAID, I got to see it in action because, USAID has supported over 60 countries that have transitioned away from assistance. And seeing it play out, an example is Costa Rica, which I've ended up writing about. Costa Rica went from middle of the pack for Latin America for survival in the 1960s, 1970s, got some US support. They decided to focus on building a universal primary care system as the very first thing they did. They have advanced that primary care system to the point that they now, on $1,600 per person per year, compared to our $15,000 per person per year system, have a 82-year life expectancy compared to our 78 years, the longest life expectancy in North and South America, except for Canada. And the approach of primary care has three dimensions that we don't have. Everybody is assigned a primary care doctor that you belong to. You can choose to go somewhere else, but you have a default place you can go. That you will pay nothing for visiting the least expensive part of the system. So going to a primary care physician for your visits, getting your basic tests, getting your basic medicines that keep you alive. And third, that there is a community health outreach capacity that you are contacted once a month at least to make sure, if you have children, is their height and weight keeping up? If you have someone who has high blood pressure, how's the high blood pressure control? Are you getting your medicines? If you have nutritional issues, connecting those people back into the primary care system. And the result of that is country after country massively reduce their deaths, especially deaths below age 50, and get to have longer and healthier lives. So the United States, we spend less than 4% of our spending on primary health care. Primary health care doctors are strapped with no outreach system, no base of...
What do you mean, no outreach system?
That until recently, they basically have had no real ability to be attached to a community health worker or anybody who's reaching out in the community and saying, hey, you need to get in, this is the time that you're needed, and let me follow up afterwards. Primary health care done best is a team sport. And so there's at Ariadne Labs, which I founded, we worked with a number of professional societies and just issued a challenge, we call it the triple-double, that there are straightforward ways to make sure we go from doubling the number of people graduating from medical schools who go into primary care, and one of the things is to make it economically competitive, have its income in line with other specialties. In Estonia, work that the School of Public Health had done did that, made the primary care salaries the same as specialist salaries. 50% of the specialists switched to primary care in Estonia.
Wow.
So there are ways to do this. Second, you need to double the number of people who have access to a community health center, because those centers are open, to you without cost for making those visits if you can't afford it. And then the third was to increase our spending on primary care. We should have it from under 5% to closer to 10%. And we have a couple places that have begun to do that and get really great results.
One of the things we did in Massachusetts, I don't know if it was just primary care connected, but I think it was a good thing that, at least in some part, will benefit the primary care world, is legislation was passed by the Beacon Hill, which is where most good ideas go to die, but not this one, which would allow doctors who have their licenses in other countries to more easily be able to practice here. That's obviously a good thing, I assume. Yes?
Yeah, it's obviously a complicated thing because on the one hand, they're often coming from, 60% of Indian medical graduates came to the United States and UK during the 1960s and 70s. I mean, it's a brain drain. On the other hand, they didn't have places and systems they were really able to practice in and sent home money. My parents gave back to the point that they founded a college in my hometown that now has, or there in my dad's community that has 2,000 students a year. So there's ways that you give back, but for us, that is one of the critical ways. It's foreign medical graduates that have often been our key, I grew up in rural Ohio as two local doctors. My mom's a pediatrician, a primary care, and my dad is a surgeon.
Athens, Ohio.
Athens, Ohio.
Jan Hudson just texted to say she grew up there too, and they're all so proud of you in Athens, Ohio.
They're not as proud as Joe Burrow. The other one who came from my hometown,
the
Bengals quarterback came from my hometown, so he's put us on the map.
Speaking of primary care, one of the things we were talking to Dr. Catherine Gerger Barnett about yesterday, the day before, whatever it was, is because of these ICE threats, there's so many patients, even those who are citizens, who won't bring their kid in or not getting vaccination, all that sort of stuff. You add that to something we first discussed actually with Anthony Fauci a bunch of years ago about the growing anti-science, I'm going to call it a movement, because I can't come up with a better word, in this country. You're also an educator, obviously. You write, you talk, or whatever. How do we undo the damage that has been done to people's trust in science in this country?
Well, what we're experiencing right now, we've always had people who will peddle pseudoscience, fake science,
But they generally weren't president of the United States.
They were not president of the United States. They were not heading the HHS. They were not the head of, leading forces at FDA, CDC, and everywhere else. That's what's changed. So, today, 90% of Americans believe that vaccines are effective, and close to that, over 85% believe it should be required for schools, and that we should not be removing vaccines for routine vaccinations that have saved an enormous number of lives. We hear now loud voices of the minority who are coming forward, but that core group of people, that hasn't changed. What has been different is we've given power to incredibly irresponsible ideological people. RFK Jr. has done extraordinary harm to this country, and not only has he applied the anti-vaccine ideology internally and is dismantling significant parts of our vaccine system, he has defunded U.S. involvement in programs abroad as well.
Yeah. Before you go, I have two things. This Trump's $11 billion health plan to replace USAID, should we be happy about this, cautious about this? What do we think of this plan?
Yeah, so the president's plan is a 50% cut in aid. It's dismantled the infrastructure to be able to make it deploy in the world. And it's being used in transactional diplomacy. Eswatini, for example, got some of its HIV funds restored when they agreed to take undocumented immigrants into their jails, right?
Okay.
That's not a way to run an HIV program at threat of turning on, turning off, turning on, turning off, and it's not tied to. We've seen this play before, where it's partly about the cuts. It's also about the idea that instead of joining the world in cooperation around how we accomplish ambitious things like eradicating polio, stopping the HIV epidemic, et cetera, we are going in a very, not even transactional way, a predatory way, saying aid is second to our political goals and to military goals. We did that in Vietnam. We did that in Iraq. We did it in Afghanistan. It doesn't deliver on the political goals or the humanitarian goals, or the political goals or the military goals, and it completely destroys our humanitarian goals.
So what the people that are listening now, what should we be doing besides, I suppose we could call our Congress people or call our senators? I mean, what do we do? Give more money to certain groups? What do we do?
Well, this is a long haul turnaround. Let's say the Democrats take over, and it's important that people be, yes, calling Congress, raising the issues, being engaged, and making sure that the invisible is made visible. But this is also about, I think it's just as important to run locally, to be involved with your community, to be connected, because so much of this comes from isolation among Americans, in the sense in which our basic community ties have frayed, and people feel fundamentally voiceless on all sides. And I think that's the critical things we have to repair. This is going to be a long haul of building back, and so in health, it's choosing your issue, being able to stay with it. But there's short-term things. Yes, give to UNICEF. Yes, give to World Food Program. I'm a strong supporter of AMREF, an African-run organization that has a local office in the United States.
AMREF?
AMREF. They do food aid, HIV, lots of things like that. The International Rescue Committee is a place that runs the clinics in a place like Clinic 7, the place we filmed in Kenya. And so there are important folks doing this kind of work, and it makes a difference.
And don't bowl alone. That's where you were going a second ago.
Don't bowl alone.
Don't bowl alone.
Don't bowl alone.
Doctor, we can't thank you enough for your time, your work, your film, everything. It's great to see you. I hope you come back soon.
We should say you're nominated for an Academy.
Well, so we made the short list for an Oscar.
List.
That means the 15, but we find out January 22 if it will be nominated or not, which would make the final 5, and we'll see.
And you're going to be showing your film to at least Democrats in Congress. Maybe some Republicans will stop by.
Yeah. We're making sure there's every way everybody can see it.
Okay.
And you should all see it in the meantime. Doctor, thanks so much for your time.
Yeah, thank you.
Atul Gawande.
Thank you so much for your time. And Being Mourner was a great book. I love that book, from beginning to end. Thank you very much for being with us. We've been speaking with renowned surgeon and author Dr. Atul Gawande, former assistant administrator for global health at the soon-to-be completely shuttered USAID. Gawande is the Fish Chair in Surgery at Brigham and Women's Hospital and a professor at Harvard Medical School. He is also the co-founder of Ariadne Labs. Thank you very much for coming in. Coming up after a quick break, we're going to open the lines to get your reflection on what we just heard, the ways the Trump administration has reshaped the United States' reputation across the world. What does it say about us that this is all being done in our name? We only have a few minutes left. If you want to call us, 877-301-8970 is the number to call or text. What do you think about USAID being shut down now? I'm Marjorie Egan. He's Jim Browder. You're listening to BPR 89.7 GBH, live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
I'm Arun Roth. Today on GBH's All Things Considered, Republican John Deaton is looking to unseat Senator Ed Markey in this year's election. He joins us to share where he stands on the latest in international, domestic, and local headlines. And local ice skaters who lost loved ones in last year's Potomac plane crash are heading to the Olympics. Those stories and all the day's news starting at 4 on GBH 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you.
And Explo. From culinary arts to veterinary science, Explo's summer program helps middle schoolers to find their spark. Day and overnight options at explo.org/summer. Priority deadline February 13th. And Brightbound. It's never too early to start thinking about what comes next, and Brightbound helps students from middle school through high school discover rewarding careers. Learn more at BRITE-bound.org.
Welcome back to BPR, Marjorie Egan, Jim Browder. I think if we had a few more Atul Gawandes in this world, we might be in a little bit better shape.
Oh my gosh,
Egan.
I know.
Can we tell you we didn't say how to spell the name of the film, and you really should watch it today. Rovina's Choice, ROVINA''S, and as Dr. Gawande said, it's on YouTube and on the New Yorker's website.
I couldn't help thinking that the Sophie's Choice, people may remember that great film where a mother has to make a choice between her children, and Rovina has to make a choice among her children. It's a very, very similar. She's not in a Nazi prison camp, but she's in South Sudan and with malnourished children.
So we only have a couple of minutes left in the show because Dr. Gawande was kind enough to extend his stay by a lot. If you have any thoughts in the next remaining few minutes, give us a buzz, 877-301-8970. I want to reiterate what Dr. Gawande said when Marjorie and he were talking about what's happened to USAID and this notion that there'll be, by the time of, I think the date he picked was the 1-year anniversary, as many as 750,000 people, 2/3 of whom are children, will have died because of the withdrawal of USAID funding. That's in our name that's being
It's
done.
in our name.
It's our government that did that. And we're curious, again, with very little time, if you have a reaction to what Dr. Gawande had to say.
Well, I just want to point something out. That
Please.
people were complaining, oh, we don't care about USAID because we don't want to spend money in these foreign countries and stuff like that. And you see why we did it if you see this film. But it's important to remember that, as Dr. Gawande said, after World War II, the Marshall Plan basically rebuilt Europe, right? But at the same time we rebuilt Europe in that after World War II period would have been the golden age for the middle class in America. Those were the 50s and 60s where you could buy a house, you could send your kids to college, you could have vacations. One person could support 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 children in the United States of America. That was when capitalism was regulated. That people that made lots of money were taxed very highly, and it was a golden age for the middle class. So the idea that we can't afford to do this anymore is ridiculous. And obviously, we spent a lot of money on weaponry back then because we were in the Cold War against Russia. He said if the average person in America pays $15,000 in taxes, out of that amount of money, the average American paid $24 to support USAID. So if there was a little bit of bureaucratic overload, big deal.
Well, also consider, what is it, every other government program is pristine. You know, can I say one other thing? I promised we'd take calls, but now we're not. Let me do one thing we didn't talk to the doctor about because it's not within his piece of the action at USAID. We had Andrew Natsios here a few months ago, who used to be the administrator of USAID, I think under George W. Bush. And he was the former chair of the Republican Party in Massachusetts, very conservative Republican. And he made that quote that was heard around the world when USAID was criticized for spending money on exporting Sesame Street.
Yeah.
And he talked about how Sesame Street did more to combat Islamic extremism than virtually anything that was done. Another way that modest amounts of money are used to make the place a healthier and safer world. We only, literally, since we promised, we have 1 minute. Jean from Melrose, the minute is yours. Welcome. Hi.
Hi. Okay. I am horrified by the cuts in USAID. I'm horrified by the cuts in medical research. And I believe that part of it is based on the racism that is going on with the Trump administration.
Of course it is.
Absolutely.
Jean, thank
because
you.
the film is based in, and by the way, you can just Google it. You just Rovina's Choice, it will come right up, and you can see it online. It's 22 minutes long, but this took place in South Sudan. People had
Kenya. Well, she came from South Sudan,
No, they left Kenya to go to the...
No, they left South Sudan to go to Kenya. Whatever it is.
Okay.
The refugee camp is on the South Sudanese border in Kenya.
Yes. Okay.
In any case.
Jared,
boy,
what's
this is a hell
going
of a
on?
transition.
Yeah.
I know. Well, it's a joy of the culture show, too. We can remind people of other things happening in the world.
That's right.
We'll start with Chef Karen Akunowitz, who is among the Bib Gourmand honorees from the Michelin Guide. So we're starting a series looking at all of the very select group, I say all, but it's a very select group of honorees from the Michelin Guide in terms of their restaurants.
You ever been to any of our restaurants?
Yes. I think I went with you.
I'm just going to say, we went, I knew you were going to forget, we went to Bar Volpe.
I got a flat tire.
Yeah, one of them is really hard to get into. The other one's a tad easier to get into, probably not after winning these awards.
I'm sure it's very difficult.
But
That'll be part of our conversation.
Spectacular. You know who she used to work for? Lead chef? Myers and Chang.
Myers and Chang.
When she was young and irresponsible.
That's right. That's where all the great chefs come from, right?
Maybe
the tutelage of Myers and Chang.
What else do you have?
And the other restaurant is Fox the Knife, so we'll talk about all of that.
Fabulous. Yeah, both fabulous.
Ali Noorani, of course, one of your regular guests, who is back in Boston now as the head of the Bar Foundation.
And we're so happy he's back in town.
So for people who don't know, Bar Foundation, major philanthropic force here in the city. So with all of these federal funding cuts, we'll talk about that.
And he's with us February 23rd.
And by the way, he used to be the voice on immigration reform in this country. It's brilliant. Yep.
And Mahesh Das, president of Boston Architectural College, is here to talk about hostile architecture.
Whoa.
This is designs that are made to keep public spaces less public. We'll talk about that.
I would say you spend the whole time on City Hall. Despite what Michelle Wu says, that's what I would do. So it sounds fabulous.
Fun show.
Great.
Jared, that sounds very good. Thank you. Thank you very much. And we have the thumbs up. We talked to you earlier about Bradley Cooper's new film. Thumbs up on that,
Thumbs up on that, yep.
Yeah, we're very excited about that.
It won't make you as upset as you thought it was going to make you.
It's a fun divorce movie.
Yes.
Okay, Jared, thank you very much.
Thanks, Jared. We'll be listening right here.
Thank you all for listening to another edition of Boston Public Radio. Henry Santoro has something on the news about the Cannabis Commission. We're having the head of the Cannabis Commission on
Friday. Shannon
okay.
O'Brien.
Shannon O'Brien's going to join us on Friday. She went through this storm and drawing over there. We're going to talk to her about that. Thank you to people that came down to the Boston Public Library.
Thank you all for coming. Appreciate it.
Thank you again to Dr. Atul Gawande. We were so thrilled to talk to him.
That'll be on the podcast, right?
Yes.
Obviously, Gawande will be available very soon. If
you can keep up with this 24/7 by way of our podcast, or check out our TikTok page at Boston Public Radio. You can tune in tomorrow for who's coming in tomorrow?
Not telling you.
Okay.
Chuck Todd.
Chuck Todd. Okay. It's not on my script, Jim. That's why.
Oh,
I
it
don't
isn't?
know. No.
I think you're on the wrong page.
I'm on the wrong page. Okay.
Chuck Todd.
Chuck Todd.
Somebody else. A lot of other people.
Okay.
Elon Stavins.
We want to thank our crew: Zoe Matthews, Nicole Garcia, Hannah
Bill
Moss.
McKibben.
Oh, Bill McKibben. Fantastic.
Andrea Cabral.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
It's amazing we get through a show.
Okay.
Isn't it really? It's rather
we want to thank
stunning.
Zoe Matthews, Nicole Garcia, Hannah Loss, our engineer John the Claw Parker, our executive producer Jane Bologna. Special thanks to our BPL staff, Maddie Geyer, Patrick Lally, Juan Jose Cadena, Olivia Corcio. Our thanks to the host of the Newsfeed Cafe. Chicken noodle soup was really good today. Across the street at the Lenox Hotel, thanks to them as well. Culture Show with Jared Bowen starts right after us here on 89.7 GBH, live, just like we are, from the Boston Public Library. So if you're in the neighborhood, you can down and see the Culture Show in action.
Can I say something before you say who
yes.
you are? Jamie just corrected me. You don't have to wait for the podcast if you want to see Dr. Gawande or anybody else today. The live stream is posted immediately, and you just rewind, and you can watch whatever you want.
And you can see Ravina's Choice just by Googling it. Ravina's Choice comes right up.
Anything else you want to say?
No, that's all I'm
Who's
gonna
on the
say.
show tomorrow? Don't look.
Bill McKibben, Chuck Todd, Andrea Cabral, and somebody
Elon
else.
Stavins.
Elon Stavins, that's
You're
right.
Marjorie Egan.
I am Marjorie Egan.
I'm Jim Browdy. Thanks for being here.
Okay, see you later.
Bye.
What's trending? What's interesting? What's going on around town? We're talking all things arts and culture on The Culture Show, next on GBH 89.7.
Funding for our programs comes from you.
And PNC Bank, who believes when you pay attention to the details, amazing things can happen. Like when you check the pockets of a jacket you haven't worn since last fall and find $20. PNC Bank. Brilliantly boring since 1865. UFOs have long captivated the imagination of the public, but can science reveal the secrets of mysterious objects seen in our skies? Find out on Nova. What are UFOs? Tonight at 9 on GBH2.
You're listening to 89.7 WGBH HD1 Boston. Online at gbhnews.org. GBH News. What matters to you?
Good afternoon. With the latest from the GBH Culture Show news desk, I'm Henry Santoro. After Renee Good was shot and killed by an ICE agent in Minneapolis last week, the incident shook poet Amanda Gorman so much she sat down and put pen to paper. The result was a poem she posted on her Instagram and read for our colleagues at NPR.
They say she is no more, that there her absence roars, blood blown like a rose.
Gorman is the country's first youth poet laureate, and no stranger to the Culture Show. NPR asked her what made her want to write this poem.
To be honest, I didn't want to write about it, but I felt like I owed it to Renee to at least try and make the attempt. I'd read that she was a writer and poet in her own right, and so even if what had happened was horrendous, I felt she was a shining example of what language can do.
And it's not only what language can do, it's also what AI can do. You can now find a musical AI version of Gorman's poem on YouTube, created by Suno AI Music.
Now bear light of candles, dark fury of flowers, pure howling of
now this just in from Newsflash Nancy. Today, Wednesday, January 14th, is National Pastrami Day. And anyone who's ever had one knows there's nothing like the smoky goodness of a pastrami sandwich on rye. Our mouths are watering just thinking about how we're going to celebrate.
Don't let the schmaltz get in your eyes, don't let the locks get in your socks. It's cheese, goss with blintzes, and eggs with salami. Don't let the schmaltz get in your eyes, or you look like a dream geschmiert with sour cream.
That's this edition of the GBH News Weekly Wednesday Afternoon Culture Cast. I'm Henry Santoro. Next up, the Culture Show with my friend and yours, Jared Bowen, live at the Boston Public Library.
I'm Jared Bowen. Coming up on the Culture Show, the Michelin Guide has landed in Boston, and 2 South Boston restaurants have been awarded Bib Gourmand honors. Chef Karen Akunowitz joins us to talk about what happens when her neighborhood Italian spots, Fox and the Knife and Bar Volpe, suddenly carry global cachet, and how Michelin attention changes the pressure, the expectations, and the daily grind of running a kitchen. Then Ali Noorani, the new president of the Bar Foundation, a philanthropic powerhouse, joins us to talk about a mounting challenge facing nonprofits across Boston, rising costs, the loss of federal funding, and hard decisions about what work can be sustained. We'll look at how philanthropic priorities are set, what gets protected, and how those choices ripple through the region's arts, education, and civic organizations. And Mahesh Das, president of the Boston Architectural College, joins us to talk about hostile architecture, urban design that makes it hard to enjoy public spaces. Think benches fitted with extra armrests to prevent lying down, metal studs added to ledges so no one can rest on them, and sloped seats that make it hard to relax. We'll look at why cities use these measures and what they reveal about the actual intentions of public space. That's all right now on The Culture Show.
The Culture Show is made possible in part by a generous contribution from the Fiducia Fund, proud to support this station's arts and culture programming.
I'm Jared Bowen. This is The Culture Show live on 89.7 and coming to you from our studio at the Boston Public Library and streaming on the GBH News YouTube channel. What happens to a neighborhood restaurant when a secretive group of inspectors suddenly tells the world this place is exceptional? With the Michelin Guide putting Boston on the menu, a handful of dining rooms now bear a burnished prestige and perhaps some newfound pressure. We're kicking off a new series checking in with the restaurants on that list to see what Michelin has meant for their kitchens, their dining rooms, and the city around them. Our first stop is South Boston with Chef Karen Akunowitz. Her 2 Italian restaurants, Fox and the Knife and Bar Volpe, both earned a Michelin Bib Gourmand designation defined by the guide as exceptionally good food at moderate prices. To be fair, her culinary arts were acclaimed long before Michelin came to kick the tires on Boston's restaurant scene. Karen Akunowitz is a James Beard award-winning chef and Top Chef alum. Welcome to the Culture Show. It is great to have you here. Congratulations.
Thank you, and thanks for having me, Jared. I appreciate it.
Well, of course, this is so exciting. This just changes our landscape. When you received word of the designation, we all knew it was coming down. It's like the Oscar nomination morning, right? What was your first blush reaction?
When we got the email that said we were even being considered, I was blown away. You always have, of course, hopes. Your restaurants are your babies and you have hopes. But for me, as someone who, I live, eat, breathe, sleep food, I've eaten at Michelin-starred restaurants all over the world. I know that that is not specifically the kind of food that we make. Our food is excellent. Our hospitality is unmatched. We have outstanding neighborhood restaurants, but I didn't think that we would be sort of in the running for any designation. And because with the Bib Gourmand, like you said, there's a little bit of shroud of mystery around Michelin, right? There is a price point, but it differs state to state, region to region, city to city, and you don't know what it is. So I had no idea that we would even considered for that category, which to me, to say this is exceptional food at a value, that's like the heart and soul of what I do and what I've always done. When we thought we were being considered, we had hoped that one of the restaurants would earn the recommended designation and just be included in the guide. And when we got the invitation to go to Philadelphia for the inaugural Boston-Philadelphia Awards, we were honestly shocked. I wish I could be cooler. I wish I could be like less transparent, but I was like jaw on the floor. Okay, we hope. And when they called all of the recommended restaurants at the ceremony and we didn't get called, I started to like tear up because I thought, oh, they've invited us here. What, as a seat filler, as a you might get something and they're not going to. And I really started getting upset. My spouse, LJ, said, was kind of like, it's cool, be cool, it's cool. I just knew we weren't going to get a star. That's just not the type of restaurant that we are. And then they called Bar Volpe's name, which is my second baby, right? She's a little bit the redheaded stepchild. We opened her during the pandemic. She never got the big press that Fox and the Knife got in 2019 when we opened. And Fox and the Knife opened as a James Beard nominee for Best New Restaurant in America, Food and Wine Best Restaurant in America, Eater National, Condé Nast Best Restaurant in America. And we opened Bar Volpe just as Omicron started. And it was just...
Of course, we know
it was a nightmare.
What it did to the restaurant industry. Well, before we talk about the impact, let me invite you to pull your mic a little bit closer.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you.
Before we talk about the impact, tell us a little bit more about your philosophy for your two restaurants, which span geographically Italy.
So, the first thing I always say is we want people to come into our restaurants. They are at their heart and soul. They're neighborhood restaurants. We want people to leave feeling better than they walked in the door. Our goal is to be ambassadors of Italian culture and food, and hospitality. And our goal is to bring that to Boston in a way where everybody feels welcome. We want to look out to the dining room. I want to look out into the dining room and see everybody. I want it to be a place that you can come to celebrate, but I want it to be a place that you can come on a Tuesday night. We wanted it to be a place that my parents would feel comfortable. We're blue collar, working class family from New Jersey. I want it to be a place that students can come and feel comfortable. I never wanted it to be at a price point that was prohibitive. Although we live in an expensive city, and I have fought against that for a long time. There have been plenty of people that have told me constantly I need to raise my prices, and I've always played it as close to the best as I could, trying to keep it what I hope is reasonably priced, and also deliver exceptional hospitality, exceptional food.
Well, let's talk about the food. And I would imagine so much of what you just discussed about making people feel welcome and invited in and leaving better is so much the philosophy of Italy. And we know how much that country is built around meals and togetherness and food. And that's something you absorbed from your time there.
Did you read my business plan?
No, but I felt it from when I've been in your restaurants.
Thank you. Oh, that means so much to me. Thank you so much. Yeah, I mean, I lived and worked in Modena, Italy for a little over a year. I worked as a stage, which is you basically go, you don't make any money, and you work for free. And I worked
You felt that strongly about it that you would do that?
I did. I visited Italy for the first time when I was in high school, and I had an experience. My friend that I was traveling with, his family that he had never met, picked us up at the train station and took us to their home and took us around the neighborhood and was like, actually, Paolo, I think you have family from the other side of your family that lives in the neighboring town. And they brought us there, and this woman invited us into her home. She didn't know us. And she fed us and gave us coffee and all of these things. And I remember just feeling like I needed to know it. I needed to understand it. It was just, to me, it was something I'd never experienced before, and it was so special. So I knew I didn't need to just visit. I needed to live there. So I worked as a pasta maker. I eventually got a job as a chef at a small enoteca in Modena, in the center of town. And that was always, I always say, I got so, you work hard, but you get a little lucky. Fox and the Knife was the restaurant that I had dreamed about opening for 20 years.
When you were making the pasta, which people can now also buy, at Bar Volpe, you have a shop of homemade pasta. What was that process? You were always talking to artists too. Of course, you were among them on this show about the tactile element of making and how that comes into play for what you do.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, we're chefs, we write recipes, we follow recipes. But there's something about it that's a little bit, I imagine, like baking bread. I'm not a baker, but baking bread, where it's like you also need to feel the dough. You need to become friends with the dough. You need to understand the weather outside, the temperature outside. Is it cold? Is it humid? And follow the recipe, but also know when it needs a little more flour, a little more kneading, a little more love. So there's a very intimate process and quality to pasta making, I believe. And I made pasta with the nonnas, little old ladies. I worked in a pastificio and a pasta shop where I got there at 4 a.m. I rode my bike there. I got there at 4 a.m. and we made tortellini. We made tortelli and tortellini. And there was only one woman allowed to make the dough. And then it went onto a table, which was actually just plywood on top of sawhorses. And it would get lifted up and turned and gone on to the next set. Ugh. And then then it would get rolled out, and that group would then cut the dough into squares, and then the next group fills it, and then it gets turned and you get to fold it. And it wasn't until the end of my time there that I actually got to fold. That was a really big deal.
Because you have to work up to that point?
Yes, you have to work up. You can only, I would put the filling onto the squares for the tortellini. And I remember, and I moved to Italy not speaking Italian. I said, I know all the food words. Yeah. Like I can order off a menu and say them very well. Didn't speak Italian. I moved to Modena. I didn't move to a big city. I didn't move to Rome or Firenze or whatever it was. So I didn't communicate very well, especially I'd just gotten there at that point in time. And they were so wonderful to me. And they said, I'm not Italian, shocking to everyone, but they said it's okay that I wasn't Italian because I was a woman and I made beautiful pasta. And I hold that compliment very, very close to my heart.
Was it risky for you to do that? Do you see yourself as a risky person?
It's so funny that you ask that. I don't think that inherently I am a risky person, but I do believe that if I don't take the risk, then I will regret it. And I'm fearful of having regrets. And as I get older, and you have more, experiences, you say, okay, if I don't do it, somebody else will. And if this is something that's important to me, I can figure it out. Or I can ask somebody, getting really comfortable with being uncomfortable and saying, hey, I don't understand this, or this, has been incredibly helpful in moving through my career. But also, I was young when I did that. I was 29 years old. So I lived in Bay Village. I've been a Bostonian for 26 years now. And I have lived in Boston proper the entire time. I lived in Bay Village. I packed up my studio apartment. I put my stuff at my parents' house in New Jersey. I sublet that apartment. And I moved with one suitcase, like one carry-on, to another country. And I left for a year and a half.
How did you pick that city, that small city?
So I had worked for a chef at Via Matta, which was owned by Christopher Myers and Michael Schlau. And my chef, Adam, who worked there, had lived and worked there. So he gave me a connection. And when I was moving there, I remember the chef said, you can come. I don't have anywhere for you to live. I can't pay you, but you can come and work here for free. And then as the time was getting closer, he wasn't answering my emails or my phone calls. Ugh. So I was like, I guess I'm still going. And I showed up at the restaurant, of course, like a movie. It was like pouring rain. I'm here. And there's a server, and he's like, Maximiliano Talloway was the chef. And he's like, there's an American girl here to see you. And he came out, and he was like, Karen, you came. And I was like, I am a Virgo. I was like, yeah, I came. We said I was going to come. This is when I was coming. No, you don't answer the phone. And that was kind of the start of my Lo Stallo Pomodoros was the first place I worked.
Well, you said you were a little bit lucky, but I'm reminded of Sally Mann being on the show not too long ago and reminding us all of that quote, luck is the residue of design. So you certainly made that happen for yourself. I'm speaking with Chef Karen Akunowitz, who is a James Beard Award-winning chef. We're talking about Fox and the Knife and Bar Volpe on the heels of her winning Michelin Bib Gourmand honors for both of her restaurants. So how does this change things now? Is there? We've all watched The Bear. There's so much conversation about what the Michelin star does. Is there that kind of pressure?
I think that it changes everything and changes nothing at the same time, for me personally. So I always think, and I do this to myself, but I always think there's an enormous amount of pressure because you have to for me, one of the most important things is being consistent. Consistency is wildly hard. And it's not sexy. It's not the creative part. It's not the creating new dishes. It's not the, the fun. Is the every damn day making sure the tagliatelle bolognese that I developed when I was living in Italy tastes the same every time people come in. It's eating a lot of food. It's talking to the cooks. It's training your chefs. I mean, I have wonderful chef de cuisines and sous chefs, and it's incredibly hard work, but I feel that all the time. I say often my worst nightmare is somebody coming in and being like, used to be good and now it's not.
Oof, yeah.
That's arrow to the heart. So I think that if you're always thinking about that and you want to remain true to yourself and what you do, and you want to remain relevant, and you want to, I always say, I'm here for a long time, not a good time. I was never trying to be the fanciest restaurant. I was never trying to be the trendiest. There's nothing trendy about me. I'm never trying to be the trendiest restaurant.
I disagree, but anyway.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. But I want to be your favorite restaurant. I want this restaurant to be consistently excellent, and I want it to be a place that you go, oh, let's go to Fox and the Knife, let's go to Bar Volpe. And I think with that, there's a lot of responsibility, and you carry a lot of weight to make sure, Fox is 6, Bar Volpe will be 4, just turned 4. And, if you want to be around for 10, look at some of the best restaurants in the city. Look at restaurants like Sarma, look at Oleana, look at Flower Bakery, look at Myers and Chang and places like that have been around for a really long time and remain everybody's favorite restaurants. There's a lot of hard work that goes into that. So, I would love us to be a fixture in the city in 4 years, in 5 years, in 10 years. And for these to be restaurants that people say, oh, yeah, that's an institution here.
Speaking of the city, what do you feel a change around the city at large with the Michelin Guide here now and the first star being administered and the few other Bib Gourmand designations?
I mean, I think it's amazing. Anytime you're part of an inaugural class for anything, how cool is it? It's such an honor, and I think that this city has amazing food, amazing restaurants, chefs and owners and operators that work really freaking hard every single day. And I don't necessarily think that we get perhaps as much spotlight as we deserve in the country. And I think that, people are kind of like, oh, Boston. It's kind of a second city, or that it's not a small, hip, cool city, right? Like either of the Portlands or, so on and so forth. But I think this shines a different kind of light on it. This is global. This is international. This is a designation saying this is a place to go and eat. And it doesn't mean that the restaurants weren't amazing before and that the food wasn't amazing before, but sometimes you just need a little elevation. You just need one person who believes in you. But I think this is what Michelin does. It's wonderful for travel and tourism. I was talking to somebody about this the other day. Oh, is it just luring in visitors? Well, hopefully it's helping to bring people to our amazing, vibrant city. And also, we had so many people come in, especially right after the awards and through December, who, and I expected this at Bar Volpe and not at Fox and the Knife, they would say, I've never been here. From Boston, I've never been here before. And I would say, welcome, this is amazing. Thank you so much for coming in. Yes, I saw that you won a Michelin award, so we decided to come in. And we saw that at Fox and the Knife as well. On Valentine's Day, New Year's Eve, I was talking to 2 women, and one of them said, I'm so excited to come here. I've seen you on the Food Network. I live in South Boston.
And had never been.
Girl, she had never been there before. She was like, oh, I've never been here. And I was like, well, welcome. But she said, I saw that you won a Michelin award. And so we really wanted to come in. And so how wonderful and amazing, especially going into, listen, this is the Northeast. This is January and February. With the exception of Valentine's Day, it is the long, dark, cold times. Everyone's in their bed eating meatloaf under the covers. Not that I blame anybody. I'm a summer girly too. But, any business that we, and I won't speak for all restaurants, but many of us, especially independently owned and operated restaurants, of which there seem to be fewer and fewer as time goes on, folks who are coming in January and February, Thank you. Thanks for keeping us open. Thanks for keeping us alive.
It's a
See
good
you on
time
Tuesday.
to get a really good reservation
It is.
at a really exceptional restaurant. Final quick question for you. I was
Please.
so excited to read that you're the daughter of a librarian, that you love to read as we're coming to you from the Boston Public Library. What are you reading right now? We love to ask people this because our listeners love to hear it.
Oh my gosh. So I'm reading the Throne of Glass series. So I'm on book 3. I'm on Heir of Fire. Manon's on her wyvern. We're like learning to fly. I always have something going, and I go between my Kindle and my Audible. So when I walk a couple miles every morning, like in the cold dark, and I listen, and then I switch to my my Kindle. And I was talking to my mom on the way here, and I told her that I was coming here to do this show, and she said, "That is the most beautiful library I have ever seen."
Yeah.
So she was very excited for me to be here today.
Well, tell your mom we all said hi.
I will.
We appreciate that she raised a reader. I'm sure we all are, since we're all here. Thank you so much. And again, congratulations.
Thank you.
So thrilled
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Chef Karen Akunowitz is a James Beard award-winning chef, Top Chef alum, and the owner of Fox and the Knife and Bar Volpe in South Boston, both now recognized with Michelin Bib Gourmand honors. Again, thank you. Coming up, Chef Ali Noorani, the new president of the Bar Foundation, on the financial squeeze facing New England nonprofits and what it means for the city's cultural life. He's next on The Culture Show. Stay with us.
The Culture Show is made possible in part by a generous contribution from the Fiducia Fund, proud to support this station's arts and culture programming.
I'm Arun Roth. Today on GBH's All Things Considered, Republican John Deaton is looking to unseat Senator Ed Markey in this year's election. He joins us to share where he stands on the latest in international, domestic, and local headlines. And local ice skaters who lost loved ones in last year's Potomac plane crash are heading to the Olympics. Those stories and all the day's news starting at 4 on GBH 89.7.
Funding for our programs comes from you.
And Brown University Pre-College Programs, where high school students experience college life, nurture their diverse interests, and make friends and memories that last a lifetime. Applications available online at precollege.brown.edu. And Vivo Performing Arts, formerly Celebrity Series, presenting Alfredo Rodriguez and Pedrito Martinez for an evening pulsing with the spirit of Cuban musical traditions. January 24th at Berkeley Performance Center. VivoPerformingArts.org. And the Delaney at the Vale, a luxury senior living rental community for adults 62 plus, where residents choose how to spend their time with amenities and programming designed to offer opportunities for connection and learning. DelaneyAtTheVale.com.
GBH Daily is a newsletter that keeps you informed, connected, and ready to go every weekday morning. You can subscribe today and get it in your inbox at gbh.org/daily.
I'm Jared Bowen. This is The Culture Show live on 89.7 from the Boston Public Library and streaming on the GBH News YouTube channel. Across Boston, nonprofits are having the same conversation behind the scenes, how to keep doing their work when the costs continue to climb and the funding becomes harder to find. For many organizations, from arts groups to schools to climate advocates, the difference between cutting programs and expanding them often comes down to one question: can we secure the support we need? That's a question Ali Noorani will address as the new president of the Bar Foundation, one of the region's largest and most influential sources of philanthropic investment investment. Narani brings to the role decades of nonprofit leadership and coalition building experience, and he takes the helm at a moment when the decisions the foundations make can reshape entire sectors of our civic and cultural life. Ali Narani, welcome to the Culture Show. Welcome back to Boston, and congratulations on your new role.
Hey, thank you so much, Jared. It's great to see you. It's just great to be back in Boston. Thank you.
Well, we are so fortunate to have you back in this city. So explain for people who don't know what the Barr Foundation does.
Sure. So the Barr Foundation has been around for almost 30 years. Our mission is to support organizations that are helping their communities thrive. We have 3 focus areas: arts and creativity, climate, and education, with a particular focus on high school. It's an organization that this year will be making approximately $130 million in grants. We're supporting about 470 organizations across New England. And I gotta say, from trustees to staff to the organizations that we're supporting, it is just a brilliant, kind, and innovative group of people. And it's just a thrill to be a part of the team.
I know many of them. I can that, and especially for what you're doing across the city. Well, how do you define your role, and do you think yours is a newly defined role in this climate where we're seeing massive funding cuts from the federal government, funds that have been a life force for so many organizations?
This is probably the toughest time, certainly in my career within the nonprofit sector, between the cuts at the federal level to the way that philanthropies across the country are reacting. It's very easy to see that organizations are under immense pressure. On the other hand, I was just talking to our team of program officers last week, and whether it's faced with financial pressure or really significant political pressure, organizations are coming up with innovative solutions of how to raise additional dollars, but also how to continue to advance their missions in this really, really high-risk political environment. And I should also say that you also have a number of philanthropies, whether they are locally or nationally, who are stepping up to the moment, who are saying, we're not going to shrink back. We are going to continue to advance, not just to meet our threshold of giving, but to exceed our threshold. And that's the kind of leadership that we need to see across the country, much less New England.
I'm curious about that because I know on the one hand, yes, you want to support, and yes, you want to make sure that no organization goes under, those organizations especially deserving for how they will fulfill their mission. But you also don't want to be the sole mechanism of support. You want to make sure that these organizations can walk on their own.
Well, that's, I think, one of the biggest roles that Barr plays in the region, is in terms of being able to relate to other foundations, other donors, so that our expert staff are in a position to be able to reach out to our peers and make the case for arts and creativity, make the case for climate, protecting our climate, to make the case for a better education system, and really try to bring other funders into these particular issue areas. When I came into philanthropy and when I moved to California from DC a few years ago, quite frankly, I didn't realize that I would be doing as much fundraising as I did as a funder.
Yeah.
But really, that's what you're trying to do, is really trying to kind of create a critical mass of dollars to support an ecosystem of organizations across any set of issues.
I've talked to people within the sector who've told me that you might not expect this, but giving away money is actually really hard. What makes it challenging?
It's hard, but it's also not as hard as actually advancing the mission and serving people and communities on the ground. I mean, look, for almost over 20 years, I was leading nonprofit organizations. So this is an incredibly fortunate position. Yes, we work incredibly hard, but I cannot sit here and say that the work that's being done on the ground in Boston, surrounding communities, is not just as hard, if not more difficult.
Where are we as a country when, and maybe we're in the same place, I don't know, you can tell me, but where so much of funding for organizations is reliant on the private sector? And in terms of philanthropy, I think I'm looking at my notes here, I think it's something in the neighborhood of 50% of funding to nonprofits comes from the private sector.
It's hard because, in a place like Boston, when you have a private sector and a corporate sector that over decades has really been shrinking as headquarters have moved to other parts of the country, if not other parts of the world, that funding base starts to shrink, and it puts more pressure on private foundations and individual donors. And it also puts more pressure on organizations to be more efficient as they're advancing their missions, to kind of create the partnerships on the ground so that they're working together to provide services or advocate for the systemic changes that we need.
I know that a lot of organizations are facing the problems that come with a transient generation now, whereas you used to have cities where multiple generations of a giving family, for example, would all stay situated in the same city. But now you have the young people and their families move on, and there isn't the investment that maybe their parents or grandparents had. And so how are you seeing nonprofits and other organizations deal with the fact that we have communities that might stay kind of young because of the freshness, but there isn't necessarily the emotional ties, the family ties that come with giving?
That's a really, really, really good question. And I think there's actually an opportunity there. And this is one of the program areas that BAR has around arts and creativity is actually the area that intrigues me the most because,
Happy to hear that.
Yes. Arts is very much, arts and creativity, it creates a common space for communities. It also creates a common sense for communities. And for all of us who are really trying to make sense of the world around us, of what's happening in Washington, D.C., what's even happening in Greater Boston, arts and creativity and the organizations that are bringing arts to our community have the opportunity to create that connection between what they're doing, what they're producing, and the families that are moving in as young families. And it becomes an opportunity not just to introduce that family to arts, but introduce that family to the idea of saying, you know what, this is my community. I like living here because there's public art. I like living here because I can go to a theater. And that's really a really powerful opportunity for arts and creativity, but I think when you kind of take a step back, it's a really powerful opportunity for the region.
If you do a diagnostic test, or if you've done one already on the health of the arts sector in our region, how would you assess it right now?
It's interesting. We talk a lot about the economic impact of the arts sector, and I think it's $22 billion across the state. It's one of the largest sectors in the state and employs thousands and thousands of people, and that's all incredibly important because that's a bottom line interest of policymakers, of businesses, of families. Yet, kind of going back to what I was saying earlier, that intangible of arts creating community, creating place, creating a sense of who we are as a culture and as a region, that to me is just as powerful and just as important because nobody wants to live in a sterile community. We want to live in vibrant communities, and vibrant communities should be accessible for everybody regardless of where they are in the economic ladder.
If you're just tuning in, I'm speaking with Ali Noorani, who is the new president of the BAR Foundation. Is it your job to come in and mix things up, to have a new leadership style? How do you look at your role and how you'll begin to shape it?
My job is not to come in and mix things up. I got to say that the trustees and the staff at the foundation are just incredible people. They're deep experts in their fields of interest. The community writ large, I think, is doing incredible work, whether it's in arts, climate, or education. If there was one thing that I want to spend some time on, it's really trying to think about what are the partnerships that need to be built among philanthropy, between philanthropy and the private sector, whether it's in Boston, Greater Boston, or even across the state and region. It really does feel like we are at a tipping point. I mean, I was in Boston 20 years ago.
That's my next question, actually, right? Yeah.
It's a generation ago. So, as I was thinking about this conversation last night, it's like I'm coming back to a Boston a generation older. And in many ways it's different, but in many ways it's the same. So in that space, what are the relationships that need to be pulled together? Again, state, local, across communities that start to create this energy of, okay, we can continue to become a better and better region for workers and their families.
Well, I wanted to ask you, you've set up that this next question was, we alluded to, you were a main presence here and now you're back. How do you find the city? You talked about the similarities. To what extent is this a different city now?
Yeah, so when I was living here, I spent most of my time in South Boston, right? And the Seaport District was just starting to break ground. The Big Dig was just finishing. The Greenway was literally just starting to emerge from the ground. And now, over the last 20 years, when I come back to Boston, it's stay in hotels that used to be vacant lots. So that's an obvious difference, and just in terms of just the development of the city, whether it's the Seaport or Cambridge. And then you also see how neighborhoods have not benefited from that infusion of resources. Mattapan, parts of Dorchester, parts of Roxbury feel like they haven't been able to take advantage of that infusion of resources. I think what the mayor has done has been amazing. I mean, I was here at the library the night of our inauguration, and it was pretty clear. It was a new generation of Boston leaders just by who was in the room. So what is that new generation of leaders to do to really ensure that the entirety of the community is thriving? And if there's one part of our mission that excites me, it's that idea of helping communities thrive and being able to partner with the public sector and the private sector to do that.
DEI issues are prevalent in a number of the communities you just listed. We know how funding is right now, at least government funding, is being stripped with any reference to diversity, equity, and inclusion. What impact is that having on the work you do at the Barr Foundation?
Well, I mean, as I was saying earlier, the political pressures on the nonprofit sector, on philanthropy, are significant. What we're seeing is a closing of the civic space, and what I think we as philanthropy, the nonprofits that we're supporting, much less the public and the private sector, we have to be thinking about how we're defending the civic space, how we're making sure that our neighbors and our families are protected and can go to school, get the healthcare services they need. But then also over time, how are we thinking about expanding the civic space again? And the fact is that the civic space includes all races, all ethnicities, all genders, and we've got to get through this moment and get back on offense.
Well, in terms of finding a consistency going forward, I think a lot of people have questions about when we'll ever see consistency again. I think about this for organizations who've seen their federal funding stripped. Okay, well, what if there is a change in administration that restores a lot of funding? So yes, it's restored for maybe 8 years. Does it then go away again? How do organizations operate under that kind of structure?
I would ask the same thing of businesses, frankly. I mean, how does the business community operate in an environment that is so unpredictable, so unstable? So I think what we've got to do is find leadership, whether it's from the nonprofit sector, from the business sector, and from the public sector, to say, you know what, these wild swings of the political pendulum, they are harming us as a country. And who are the leaders that are going to step forward and ask the question, okay, how do we do this differently? And that's not going to be a question that we can answer in a month, in 2 months, or in 5 years. It's got to be a process and a set of conversations that have a long tail to them and really cultivate the leadership that is going to be necessary. And another program that we have at the foundation, the Barr Fellows, has been really exemplary in terms of supporting leadership from organizations across the region, so that they have the time and the resources to step back and ask themselves the question, how do I become a better leader? And that's what we need right now, are better leaders.
For that entire last answer, I was thinking about you and your prior roles, especially around immigration. You're very intimately aware with how government works, how leaders rise, how leaders can have an impact for good or bad on any facet of our lives. How does your experience, especially around immigration and your understanding of government, come to bear in this moment as you think about our way forward?
I got to say, it's when you ask the question of kind of how Boston has changed, the other thing has changed is I've changed. 20 years later, I'm now an old man girl dad. So, some would say I've finally grown up. But, that question is both professional and it's personal, because these issues, whether again it's arts or climate or education, they mean a lot to the communities that we care about. They mean a lot to my family now. And I'm incredibly excited to be able to wrap my hands around them, whether it's wrapping my hands around them professionally and working with staff, or wrapping my hands around them just in terms of my family and my daughter. And that's both exciting and also incredibly daunting.
How much hope do you have going forward in again, knowing government the way you do and trying to dissect this moment the way the rest of us are trying to dissect it?
I mean, Jared, I worked for almost 20 years in immigration advocacy, and I have such respect for the folks at the Mass Immigrant and Refugee Advocacy Coalition and all my friends and colleagues still in the immigration space. If you're not optimistic about the future, it's really hard to do this work. So I'm optimistic that we have a set of new leadership in Boston that are looking forward and not looking back. I'm optimistic that we have a set of leadership from the past that are supporting new leadership to rise. And I just have to be optimistic that we as a country can make sense of this moment, and we can create those common spaces where we can come together and not just make sense of this moment, but chart a path forward so that we can all thrive.
It's very helpful for me and all of our listeners to hear, and everybody here at the library to hear that. Ali Noorani, again, congratulations on the new role. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much, Jared.
Ali Noorani is the new president of the Barr Foundation. Again, it's been great to speak with you. And coming up, the dark side of design, how hostile architecture is being used to keep the public from using public spaces. Mahesh Das, president of Boston Architectural College, joins us for that conversation. He's next on The Culture Show. Stay with us.
There are thousands of oil tankers sailing the high seas. It's nearly impossible to know who owns some of them.
Length to be concealed is because often the true owner is the Kremlin.
It's part of Russia's strategy to evade international sanctions. Hear that story next time on The World.
This afternoon at 3, here on GBH News 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you.
And the Office of the Massachusetts State Treasurer. The Unclaimed Property Division is holding unclaimed funds from utility bills, uncashed paychecks, savings accounts, and more. To see if you have unclaimed money, you can visit findmassmoney.gov. And Boston Harbor Hotel, celebrating the 37th annual Boston Wine and Food Festival with winemaker-hosted dinners, seminars, and more from January through March. Details at boswineandfoodfestival.com. And Brightbound. Careers aren't one size fits all, and Brightbound helps students as young as middle school identify their strengths and find careers that fit them just right. Learn more at britebound.org.
Securely and confidentially contact GBH News by messaging us on the Signal app. Visit gbhnews.org/investigations for more information. gbhnews.org/investigations.
I'm Jared Bowen. This is The Culture Show, live on 89.7 from our studio at the Boston Public Library and streaming on the GBH News YouTube channel. It's time for a recurring feature, AI Actual Intelligence, where we tap into the most interesting thinkers in our region. Their insights and observations are totally original and algorithm-free. Joining us, as he does every month, is Mahesh Das, president of Boston Architectural College and the co-author of the graphic novella about AI titled I Know Bot. This month, we're focusing on hostile or defensive architecture, the practice of using design to restrict how public spaces and amenities are used, like designing ways to prevent loitering, sleeping in public, and skateboarding. Why are cities using these measures, and what do they reveal about how open we actually want our public spaces to be? Mahesh Das, welcome back. Great to see you.
Thank you, Jared. Always a pleasure.
Well, how prevalent is this becoming? For myriad reasons, Frank Gehry died last month, so we wanted to talk about him, but this is something that we've been wanting to talk, I've desperately been wanting to talk to you about on the show, because once you start to open your eyes to it, you see it everywhere, on park benches, on the streets, cobblestone streets, or stones underneath awnings to ensure that people don't sleep there. How prevalent is defensive or hostile architecture?
Yeah, Jared, I think first it is very prevalent. It's there virtually in every city. And first, I think it is probably useful to define what it is. What do we mean by hostile architecture? And what is defensive architecture? There is a little distinction between those two. Hostile architecture is defined usually as that which is aimed at primarily homeless people, unhoused people, from utilizing public infrastructure to just loiter, sleep, lie down, or encamp. And that's what really it is aimed at. So it is mostly to do with public infrastructure, public space of a city, and usually big cities. So Boston is, of course, you will see it, although there is no legislation yet, although there is some legislation in the pipeline, I will mention about it. But virtually every city has it, and there is a reason why that is happening. And then there is defensive architecture, which is slightly different from defensive design and defensive urban design, and that has been around since 1970s. Oscar Newman was the one who proposed it, and it is primarily aimed at residential environments and neighborhoods and how to make them safer. But hostile architecture is generally there to prevent, in a very targeted way, certain behaviors in those environments.
Well, I guess if we were to back up and think of this philosophically, we know that oftentimes things are put into place, measures are put into place, or physical things are constructed for a reason. So how do we balance what is exclusionary versus what might be necessary?
Yeah, I think as you mentioned at the outset, hostile architecture is characterized by things like spikes or gravel or removing the benches altogether from bus stops and other waiting spaces, parks, and other public spaces. Right, so ironically, it ends up actually impacting everybody. Everybody gets affected negatively by these strategies. Actually, I wouldn't even call them strategies, I would call them tactics. And these are more a symbol of, or a reminder of, deeper problems that we are not willing to or cannot solve them for various reasons. So in that sense, they are symptoms of deeper problems.
Well, for instance, I was reading that I think San Diego spent well over $1 million to implement some of these devices to create hostile architecture, when one thinks if you maybe had spent that $1 million+ to counter homelessness, perhaps you'd have a different result.
Yeah, absolutely. I think in San Diego, as well as virtually every city, spends a lot of money in these tactics because it is relatively easier, if you will, to implement them. I would characterize them, technically speaking, as lazy tactics.
I was going to say, you were using air quotes when you said easier.
They're lazy in the sense that they're very easy to do, but they're not strategic. They do not address a deeper problem of homelessness or psychological, well-being, mental health, or absence of mental health strategies, or addiction and or lack of support systems for that. So there is a whole element of policy and public amenities or public measures that are missing, and those are difficult to address. So cities usually resort to this because it takes relatively less diligence and process to do things like hostile architecture, hostile measures. But very difficult to do very proactive, purposeful public policy or design that requires many people to be brought together. And I'll give you some examples of that, but that is the distinction between these two.
What are some of the great examples? And by the way, if people are just tuning in, I'm speaking with Mahesh Das, president of Boston Architectural College. We're talking this month about hostile architecture, but what are some of those examples?
Yeah, so in Oklahoma City has some, you have both kinds of examples, if you will, and more recently, the city undertook a very collaborative housing undertaking initiative. They involved 50 organizations, and the purpose was to make sure systematically support and assist transitioning homeless population individuals to certain level of stabilization and reintegration, putting them in kinds of situations that help them flourish and come back to life, and rather than being in the margins, left, unattended, marginalized, uncared for, right? So they did that, and it is a massive undertaking, and that allowed for 500 individuals to be brought back into a stable lifestyle and re-engagement in a variety of ways. So those are more difficult, challenging undertakings. It requires leadership, it requires thoughtfulness, it requires consensus and coordination, and that is why those are more challenging to do, but those are the right things to do in my view.
Well, to go back to the examples of what happened when it when that kind of thinking and proactive effort doesn't happen, as in you mentioned happening in Oklahoma, I think of the Moynihan train station in New York. Massive, gorgeous new train station for the city that is vastly empty because there are no seats there at all. And I just read that they pulled the benches out of Union Station in Washington, D.C. So what are the consequences? I think especially if Moynihan Train Hall, I'm through there fairly regularly, when you have, again, this massive, gorgeous space for the people that feels empty and feels strange.
Yeah, it maybe, ironically, that shows the kind of a pain that the society is experiencing collectively for these unresolved problems that are deeper and societal. And I was in Washington, D.C., and I just experienced that too. And it is actually quite surreal to encounter that. It is public space, and you just have no way of resting or staying, engaging and interacting. So it is there are two terms in sociological terms, sociopetal and sociofugal. So in this case, sociopetal is where you bring people together, and sociofugal is where you drive people away. And it is the latter that is happening in these spaces. Already with the electronic screens that we carry all around, that discourages public engagement and interaction, social interaction in person, right? We are always into our phones and screens. And add to that this kind of a situation where you are pushing people away.
Well, in Moynihan Train Hall, you're literally pushing people who have means, aka all the people traveling on an Amtrak, as I generally am, get the only seating area because they have a special lounge for the Amtrak passengers, and so there becomes this us and them situation that seems to be created for all of us.
Yeah, I mean, it is a social kind of a division, striation, stratification, and demarcation, compartmentalization, and in the end, why? I mean, the question is, go to first principles. Oscar Newman, the defensible space, architect and urban planner, he said something very beautiful. He said, you have to go back to the first principles when you are you're trying to solve a problem. And that's what he tried to do in 1970s when he said, why are residential neighborhoods, large residential developments failing at that time in particular? They still continue to, but then he came up with ways of architecturally and through design create an environment that is naturally, it belongs to the people, the territory is owned by people, spaces are for the people. There is a kind of a division, let's say a hierarchy between public, semi-public, semi-private and private spaces that is clearly understood.
Well, if we make the distinction between defensive or hostile architecture and defensible spaces, what are some of the devices of defensible spaces?
Yeah, so the defensible spaces are about people, enabling people to live together in a safe and secure environment, but also building the community. It is about community building.
So you're taking care of your space
You're
together,
taking care of your space. I mean, when you own the space, so he said that in a public housing project, certain areas are prone to crime or behaviors that are counterproductive because they're not properly owned and surveilled and or engaged by the community, cared by the community, that they don't appear to be owned, right? So there is a litter all over the place or whatever else that is happening that indicates for promoting certain undesirable behaviors. So it talks about how to own the spaces, how to make them visually and spatially appealing so that people actually use them and for better behaviors and bringing the community together.
I want to go back to something you just mentioned. There's legislation, you said, in this regard. What's happening right now?
Yes, so various cities and jurisdictions have legislation. In our case, in Boston, there has been a legislation that has been in the pipeline, I would say since 2021. It is still making its way through. In fact, I brought that is the House Bill 3307. It is Representative Mike Connolly. And that basically defines what is hostile architecture, what is meant by it, and then what is not included in the definition. And then it proposes that anybody who's trying to do hostile architecture could be penalized.
Interesting. Is this why are we talking about this now? Is it reaching sort of a critical mass point or a critical awareness point?
Yeah, I mean, if you remember in Arlington in 2021, they installed spikes under the underpasses. And the idea was, at least the proposed idea was, they would prevent birds and other animals from coming. But actually the idea was to prevent homeless population from using that space. And there was a huge outcry, and they removed all those spikes and all that. So I think that might have been one of the harbingers of this particular legislation. But there is actually hostile legislation that goes on all around. In fact, it has been on the rise. Like in some jurisdictions, there is like a 200% increase in the kinds of measures that are in place to put in place hostile architecture.
Well, it's just so fascinating to me, too, the ripple effect. Another one of the devices they use for hostile architecture, and I know we only have a few seconds left, but are the slanted benches that allow you to rest for a moment, but you can't really sit there. But for people I was reading with knee problems, not good for them. So there's just a ripple, very significant consequential effect here.
They end up excluding people. They end up as reminders, and useless reminders, rather useless infrastructure publicly. So I would say, we need to make sure we are creating environments that are supportive, inclusive, and begin to solve the real problems the real way, in a strategic way, and just move away from these tactics that end up hurting everybody and not serve any useful purpose.
Well, Mahesh Das, you always bring such interesting topics our way. Thank you so much for being here. Great to see you.
Always a pleasure.
Mahesh Das is president of Boston Architectural College and the co-author of the graphic novella about artificial intelligence titled I Knowbot. He joins us every month. Thank you for listening to another edition of The Culture Show. Tune in tomorrow or watch us on the GBH News YouTube channel for Congressman Jim Clyburn on his new book about the pioneering congressman who shaped our nation. We'll also have a preview of the Boston Celtic Festival with the band Scottish Fish. Thanks today to Henry Santoro for curating our Culture Cast. Today's engineer is Bill Piaccatelli. The BPL technical and logistics crew, Maddie Geyer, Bill Francis, Sandra Lopez-Burke, Juan Jose Cadena, Chris Hanks, Pat Lally, and Olivia Corshio. Also thanks to the Newsfeed Cafe. I don't know why I can't talk today, Mahesh. Thank you for everyone who came down to see us at the library. We love seeing you. Thank you for being here. I'm Jared Bowen. Have a great day.
The Culture Show is made possible in part by a generous contribution from the Fiducia Fund, proud to support this station's arts and culture programming.